Chapter 1493. At this moment, Duque's mind was in a mess. No matter how he looked at it, Valen looked like he was about to die. Duque cursed in his heart. He really wanted to yell, "Goddess of fate, this isn't the right script." In the original history, Valen had indeed died. Why was it said that one died? Because in the version of King of Draenor, the Valen in the main timeline was fine. Instead, in the Draenor world where the brainless roar went to cause trouble in another timeline, the Valen in that branch of time died trying to save a fallen Naru. The one who died was something like a clone Valen. And now you're telling me that the Valen in the main storyline is in trouble? Duque really couldn't figure it out now. Duke knew that she must be feeling terrible as she watched Valen fall to the ground and Imriel rush over to help him up. Valen lay on the ice. The holy light that surrounded him moments ago, as bright as the rising sun, was getting weaker and weaker. He didn't say a word and just smiled. Like a doting father, he stretched out his trembling hand and gently stroked Imriel's head. The holy light on his body had disappeared, and now he looked no different from an ordinary old Draenei. One couldn't tell at all that he used to be one of the three big shots of Eredar along with Kill Jaden and Archimonde. Duque was a little lucky but also a little unlucky to witness the scene of Valen's death. At this moment, Duque suddenly understood. In fact, Valen was very old, even for the Draenei who claimed to have eternal life. In the torment of being chased 25,000 years ago, in the repeated assassination and encirclement, it was impossible for him to not be injured at all. Valen might have been unable to hold on for a long time, but with a stubborn persistence, he stubbornly stood in front of his people. He wanted to use his last breath to find a way out for his people. But at the same time, he also wanted to repay the Naru tribe for saving the Draenei. If it weren't for the Naru who used a spaceship to rescue the Draenei who refused to associate with Sargeras from planet Argus, there would probably be no Draenei left in the world, and no one would know the secret of the Burning Legion. Over the years, Muru had protected the Draenei more than once. This was an inevitable repayment. Whether it was for Muru or for the sake of purifying the dark Naru called Kara, Willan would sacrifice his life without hesitation. Imriel looked sad, but when she realized that Wayland's death could not be reversed, she accepted it. A Draenei girl's ethereal and clear voice echoed in the sky above the black divine palace. With the help of the translator, Duque understood. The darkness will eventually pass and all the suffering will be worth it. May our companions be as numerous as the stars in the sky, as endless as a stream. I hope that pain can sharpen our hearts and that failure can guide us. I hope that we can meet more comrades. I hope that we can finally defeat the Burning Legion. Listening to Imriel's singing, Duque fell silent. He still did not know what to do about Willan's death, or rather he was at a loss. Suddenly, Duque saw Willan smiling at him. The Draenei prophet raised his right index finger shakily, and used the last of his strength to shoot a beam of light at Duque's brow. The next moment, Duque, who was in Karazhan, found that his will was connected to a strange world. He immediately saw an unusual sky above his head. Four conspicuous moons immediately attracted his attention. The air was amber and the blue rock veins twisted and intertwined in thousands of different ways, forming strange rock structures. Duque did not see any water source, but the blue rocks were like surging waves that were frozen in an instant. The scene was like the fantasy of a talented artist. Some creatures were scattered on the surface of the rocks, or hovered in the air. They came in all shapes and sizes, and some were even difficult to describe. Bright colors, different movements, dances, games, battles. Almost none of the patterns formed had any real meaning. Duque tried his best to find an abstract meaning in all the chaos. At this time, a creature that looked like a Draenei appeared, leading many demons, and began to kill all the creatures in this world. This guy easily used green energy to flatten everything around him. After clearing up an empty space, he knelt in the ruins that he destroyed, and used his claw-shaped fingers to draw mysterious symbols with terrifying energy. When he was done, the slaughter around him stopped. At this moment, it was abnormally quiet, and the whole world was in a terrifying silence, waiting for the death knell to ring. Then there was an explosion that destroyed the world. When Duque tried to divert his attention to try to trace this spiritual message, the transmission stopped. Wait. Haven't. When Duque came back to his senses, something even more ridiculous happened. Under everyone's gaze, Willan's translucent soul flew out of his body, and was then sucked into the soul box that was on its last breath. Faster thief. What the hell? Not only did he suck Orgrim, he even sucked Willen's soul. You're just a soul box, you're going against the heavens. For a moment, Duque had the urge to destroy the soul box on the spot and save Willen's soul. But at this moment Thrall and the others could not stop in time, and directly destroyed the last form of the soul box, the source of wrath. After all, the source of wrath had something called wrath aura. Who knew how much wrath energy was stored in the soul box, and when it released this negative energy, everyone in that space would have to bear the shadow damage that would double over time. Without a transcendent existence like Duque to hold the line, this was a battle of mutual harm. Either Thrall and the others would be crushed to death by the shadow energy, or they would destroy the soul box first. The current situation was just that cruel. They did not dare to stop and they could not stop. Looking at the soul box that sucked Willen's soul in at the last moment, and then turned into a delicate little box, everyone, be it the Alliance or the Horde, was stunned. They did not know what expression to use to face this situation. This, can I use vulgar language? Can't. Then I have nothing else to say. Duque's head was about to explode and he did not know what to say. But before he gave a sad speech there was one last thing to do. Take care of Illidan. Chapter 1494. The Draenei were on the verge of losing their minds. Back in Argus they had a prosperous country and kind people, but all of that had been ended by Sargeras's power. When the other two leaders had turned their people into the devil's minions for power, Velen had indeed chosen to lead his people into the light. However, this time they had been on the run for a full 25,000 years. During this painful and unforgettable period, it was Velen who had been the spiritual pillar of the Draenei. He had constantly guided them, encouraged them and led them out of despair and hardship. It could be said that for many Draenei who had been born on the spaceship and on the run, Velen was their only hope of survival. Now this pillar of support for the entire race, the immortal Velen, had suddenly fallen without any warning. This caused all the Draenei to fall into grief and madness. Merad was in a rare state of rage. He waved his holy light warhammer and rushed up the ice stairway that had carried Velen to the highest point of the platform. Suddenly the heaven stairway broke. Rad fell from a height of more than 3 meters. Then he saw Duque standing at the edge of the hole and anger welled up in his heart. Duke Marcus, what are you doing? Duque turned around slightly, his eyes sharp. He glared at Merad. Look at your holy light and think about what Prophet Velen taught you. Fighting against evil requires a warrior with a pure heart, not an avenger. Are you worthy of Velen's teachings? Merad's body trembled. Only then did he realize that the holy light on his body had become sparse and messy. The holy light was the purest manifestation of the will of justice in one's heart. If the motive was not pure, the holy light would naturally not be pure, and the power of smite would plummet. Merad was speechless. On the other side, Imriel gently put down Velen's withered body that had lost its soul. She picked up her warhammer. Imriel's body lit up with a holy golden light. This was the Black Temple, the darkest and most filthy place in all of Draenor. Eredar warlocks from the twisting nether carried out all kinds of forbidden experiments, and the wails of the souls of the wronged filled the once sacred hall. Hence, the sky above the darkness shrine was always shrouded in the most evil and thick black clouds. However, at this moment, a golden dot of light grew larger and larger. From a small dot, it became a golden pillar of light that pierced through the heavens and the earth. At first it was a little vague, but soon, everyone heard a female voice. She said, Prophet Willen's flame of life has been extinguished. The Draenei are not destroyed. The Draenei people love peace, but as long as the Burning Legion is not destroyed, the Draenei people will join hands with everyone in the Alliance to raise the Alliance's war flag high and let it fly high above this glorious world. Long live the Alliance. It was a vow to fight. Every Draenei, every allied warrior who could see Imriel, could clearly see the warhammer in Imriel's hand turning into a golden torch. The holy light was blazing, burning fiercely. Then another pillar of light pierced through the heavens and the earth. That was the will of countless Draenei paladins and priests. Then the pillar of light gently turned into a beautiful arc of light, merging with Imriel's pillar of light, becoming an even bigger pillar of light. Duque was a little stunned. He watched as Imriel's body was surrounded by golden flames. In an instant, a dazzling soul war flag rose from Imriel's back, and immediately turned into a pair of shining golden wings. Now Imriel had 2 wings like her compatriots. However, the Eridar demon had ugly bat wings, and now her hooves looked more like an angel. Alright, hooves and angels. Just the thought of it made Duque drunk. He really did not know that there was such a trick. Thinking about it, it seemed reasonable. After all, when he did not give up his moral integrity, it was because of a kind-hearted big boss who passed it on to him that he was able to avoid the crisis of his soul falling into depravity. Spiritual energy originated from the soul. Since souls could be passed on as one of the greatest manifestations of soul energy, it was not impossible to pass on the holy light to others. Of course, the hooves were not that powerful, but the problem was that Valen had them. Looking at the system notification, Valen passed about 18,000 years worth of holy light energy to Imriel. Duque felt a headache coming on. Once upon a time, Duque was a Wuxia fan. Every night when he could not sleep, he would fantasize about some old man passing on 60 years worth of inner strength to him. Now that old fart Valen actually gave Imriel the holy charlatan card. Now the hooves were really going against the natural order. Looking at the shiny golden hooves that were even more holy than the golden holy Saya, Duque felt a little sad. 18,000 years worth of holy light energy. Why didn't you give me some? While Duque was complaining, he suddenly received a message from Alonso's fail. Duque, His Excellency Valen seems to have poured all the remaining holy light energy that he could not into Imriel's body into the magic weave before he died. The system notification again. Valen has injected about 8,000 years worth of holy light energy into the magic weave. That's good. Valen, you're a good friend. I'll take care of your hooves from now on. Even though he knew that Valen could not give him the hooves, that feeling was like winning the lottery or opening a treasure chest and getting a divine artifact. Her hooves fluttered her golden holy light wings unskillfully and rose into the air. Then, with a ridiculous posture similar to a standing long jump, she jumped onto the highest platform of the Black Temple. Commander Marcus I. Imriel, as the Draenei leader candidate, requests to join the crusade against Illidan. The sound of her hooves was sonorous and powerful. At this time, there was no longer any hesitation on her youthful face. Duque instinctively wanted to refuse at first. It was not that he did not think highly of Imriel's potential, but it took time and opportunity to turn potential into strength. Since ancient times, many geniuses had failed halfway and could not fulfill their potential. Valen suddenly died, and Duque did not want another Draenei leader to die. This was because the rest of the Draenei were mediocre people, and Duque did not want to see any of them die. But when he saw the girl's pleading eyes, Duque nodded. Originally, you were not qualified to participate in a battle of this level. This is your protection. But seeing that His Excellency Valen sacrificed himself for the Alliance, I agree. This time I will hold the line. Remember, you owe me a favor. No problem, Imriel replied brightly. Her hooves sang the holy light battle song loudly, bathing her in light and charging straight towards Illidan. Chapter 1495. Just now, Duque had the time to do so many things, of course, because Illidan was too busy to leave. Maeve Shadowsong locked Illidan up for 10,000 years and chased him for nearly 10 years. She was able to put Illidan, who was a demigod, in such a difficult position with her strength that had yet to enter the realm of the gods. Of course, it was because her tactics and special skills were quite effective against Illidan. Illidan was already an agility hero, and Maeve's agility was even higher than Illidan's. In addition, after Illidan entered the Outland because of the semi-demonization of his body, while improving his magic ability and close combat ability, the increase in weight caused his agility to decrease slightly. The gap in speed between the two could be said to be getting bigger and bigger. Usually Illidan was faster, but Maeve was faster. Maeve had a skill similar to Mage's Flash. This kind of short-distance teleportation that could be used almost continuously allowed her to escape danger every time she was in danger. Illidan first fought with the 4 demigods, then slapped Duque with the elemental palm, and then spent a lot of magic to release Muru and drive him to open black hole. Just now, because Duque had purified Muru, he suffered a mental backlash. Could be said that Illidan was already quite injured. Duque had the time to take care of the hoof because Illidan was being attacked by Maeve and Vashj. Maeve fought Illidan in close combat, and from time to time she would use Shadow Trap to give Illidan a hard hit, or suddenly disappear, followed by a set of backstab and shadow ambush. And Vashti would look for opportunities, and when she wasn't sure, she would never shoot indiscriminately. After a few rounds, the extremely smart Vashti actually faintly grasped Mayev's attack rhythm and made a few successful coordination. This made Illidan feel even more uncomfortable. Illidan suddenly saw an obviously unqualified hoof running up to him with golden light all over his body. What he felt in his heart was not happiness but endless anger. He could see that Duque quite valued this Drenii girl. If he was a despicable person, then he would definitely think that the opportunity had come. As long as he captured this blue-skinned girl, maybe he would have a chance to escape. But he was Illidan. The arrogant and arrogant Illidan. The stubborn Illidan who always insisted on doing things his own way. He disdained taking hostages. Therefore he felt humiliated when he saw a young female holy knight who did not even have a demigod body charging at him. Don't look down on me. Bearing the brunt of Mayev's sword formation and Vashti's triple shot, Illidan suddenly accelerated and slashed at Imriel. Warblade of Azzinoth was an extremely fast weapon to begin with. This was the first time Imriel had seen such a faintly discernible sword technique in his life. This was a world of difference from the Macho Man style that she had faced before, where every hit was like heaven and earth. Imriel had been tricked. The knife flew past the hoof's clumsy parry and slashed at her neck. For a moment, Vashti and Mayev, who wanted to save him, cursed in their hearts. Who knew that an accident would happen? Clang. The mighty Azzinoth's blade actually bounced off. In fact, when Illidan swung his sword at Imriel's shoulder and neck armor, he could not help but feel bitter. The crescent-shaped curved blade in his hand was a divine weapon through and through. But this slash only left a deep gash on the opponent's armor, and did not hurt her flesh at all. Illidan could not help but feel a chill in his heart. He was a demigod, and one slash could not even break the opponent's defense. This proved that his dark energy had weakened, and the opponent's power of holy light was strong. The powerful holy light created a strong armor-like effect, reducing most of the damage from the warblade of Azzinoth. Illidan was startled, and so was Imriel. She never thought that the gap between her and her opponent was so huge. If not for the power of holy light inherited by Master Valen, she would have been decapitated by that slash just now. One would not know the power of the divine realm if one did not fight with a real powerhouse. Her strength had actually soared to the level of a hero after a few months of training. In addition to Willen's holy light, she originally thought that she would be able to fight against any demigod. However, Willen's simple oblique slash had caught her off guard. Illidan's attack was not just fast. His well-honed technique allowed him to double accelerate his sword according to his opponent's reaction. Obviously, he had guessed her next intentions and actions, so he took the initiative to attack the vital area that she had to save. If not for the holy light's stronger restraint on Illidan than expected, she would have been decapitated. At this moment, Imriel deeply understood what Master Valen meant when he said, "You are no match for the top powerhouses." For a moment, Hoof could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Of course, she was not the only one who broke out in a cold sweat. Duque, who was holding the line, also broke out in a cold sweat. He was betting that Hoof would be invincible at the last moment, and that would be victory. Who knew that Hoof would be able to withstand it? In the following battle, Imriel was simply more and more shocked. She knew very well that she could continue to fight, not because she had become stronger, but because the other two powerhouses, Mayev and Vashti, were entangled with Illidan. Even if Illidan did not have the time to attack her, the absolute difference in attack speed still caused her to be suppressed by Illidan, and she almost could not even fight back. But when Illidan's fast sword slashed her body, she could still withstand it. This was because when Illidan slashed her, he would also receive the damage from her aura of punishment. And she injected a large area of holy power into the ground, which was also hurting Illidan. On the other side, Illidan was also frustrated. In the beginning, this Drenii girl was so weak that if it was a one-on-one fight, he was confident that he could kill her in 3 moves. But as the battle went on, Imriel had become more and more mature, and her counterattack and defense had become more and more stable. In contrast, Illidan had become her sparring partner, teaching her how to kill him with real swords and spears. At this moment, Illidan finally realized that no matter how much he suppressed this girl in the duel, no matter how much advantage he had, he would never be able to win. Now he was like a trapped beast, making his last resistance and letting out a final roar. No, no, no. I am Illidan's storm rage. The strongest night elf in the world. This is definitely not my ending. Illidan no longer had any hope of killing Maiev Shadowsong or Vashj. But at least he still had a chance to drag this Draenei girl down with him. Chapter 1496. Tyrande, who was in Karazhan, felt bitter as she watched Illidan being beaten by the three heroines. Illidan was proud. Even though he had fallen into the path of demons, no one could take away his pride. Originally, with Illidan's demigod skills and speed, no one could stop him if he wanted to leave. Living an ignoble existence was not something that every expert could do. Illidan was still angrily attacking every enemy in his field of vision. He used his dual blades and his dark magic, but everyone could see that he was rapidly weakening. Rumbling sounds came from all over the Black Temple. At first it was fierce, but in the last few minutes it had calmed down. That was the end of the battle. The allied army dragged the wounded away and left the rest to the logistics team to clean up the battlefield. They killed the demons that were not completely dead, then blew up those that needed to be blown up and purified those that needed to be purified. Even if the Outland would one day collapse before that day came, the Black Temple would still be returned to the Draenei and renamed to the Temple of Karabaer. Illidan was like a cornered beast. He still had too many things to do. His dreams had not been realized. His grand blueprint had only been completed a few pieces. Was he going to give up just like that? No. He was not willing. He was not willing. Even if he lost to anyone, he could not lose to Duke Marcus, the hateful human who had stolen Tyrande from him. No. Did you see that? Did you see that? I haven't lost. I haven't lost. Illidan yelled like a madman. Whether it was the three heroines who were besieging Illidan, or the powerful figures who were holding the line, none of them took Illidan's words to heart. They only thought that it was the last words of madness of a traitor whose soul had been corrupted by evil energy, and who was already more demon than elf. Only two people understood what he was saying. Tyrande, who was in Karazhan, hugged Duque tightly. She wanted to rub her perfect face into Duque's chest. Duque could clearly feel a wetness spreading from his chest. It was Tyrande's tears. Compared to Tyrande's simple sadness, Duque was actually the most conflicted. At this moment, Duke was finally certain that Illidan was just like how it was in history. He was actually playing the infernal affairs game. Why was it that he had been hunted by Maiev for so many years but had never fought with her? How did Illidan react when he heard that Tyrande and a small number of her sentinels had fallen into the river Erevath and been attacked by the Scourge? It was salvation. Fleeing to the Outlands was one thing, and so was the final battle with Earthies. Who would have thought that Illidan had such a magnificent demigod-level power? If he was merely controlled by dark powers, if he was merely a traitor and a loser, why did he not seek revenge on his people who used him and then abandoned him like trash? Why was he willing to join forces with his brother who had banished him, to save Tyrande even though he was already a demon? In fact, he didn't even hate Duque who had stolen Tyrande from him. He didn't even want to kill Duque. Yes, his goal had never changed. He loved Tyrande. As long as Tyrande was happy, he would even allow Duque to continue living in this world. He respected and loved his brother, and he also loved the people who had created his lover and brother. He had made mistakes and he had never denied his mistakes, but his original intention had never changed. So even at the very end, he who was eager to prove his strength, the person he wanted to fight, was not Maiev who had been chasing after him for so many years, nor was it Vashj who was born as a high elf and then betrayed him. Instead, it was the hoof that had nothing to do with the elves. Ireal. Was this not a little ridiculous? But it was not ridiculous at all. At this moment, Duque heard a famous quote from his history. Betrayal? In fact, I am the one who was betrayed. I am still being hunted by people and I am still hated by people. Now that I'm blind, I can foresee the future that others can't. Sometimes fate must be in your own hands. No matter what you think, no matter what you do, I want to protect you. Even if he had fallen into the path of demons, he still wanted to protect his lover and people. It was really amazing. Unfortunately, he had no one to tell and no one would know. On the scene, Illidan released his final ultimate move. Suddenly, dozens of shadow fiends the size of small hills appeared on the platform of the temple. This kind of demonic creature that lived in the shadows had very disgusting characteristics. This was a special skill that was completely different from elemental magic. It could directly attack the target's shadow on the ground, causing the shadow to bite the target. the feeling of the body forcibly entering a coma state, but one's mind was abnormally clear. Anyone would feel terrible. The Kiraj twin emperors Kale, That's and Vasht were all instantly imprisoned by these huge shadow fiends. With their strength, the imprisonment only lasted for a short moment, maybe a tenth of a second or maybe even less. Even if Maev, who had not been hit, summoned a powerful, heavenly vengeance, and did not fall into a coma state, he was still busy. Duque also looked busy. He let Alonso's doppelganger fiercely attack and clean up the surrounding shadow fiends. For Illidan's surprise attack, this was enough. Illidan's figure suddenly shrunk. He was no longer the extremely burly huge demon, but more like a former demon hunter. His figure was thin and strong. He dashed forward quickly, and because his speed was too fast, his posture was too low, giving the illusion that he was swimming close to the ground. Not good. Imriel's heart skipped a beat. She no longer had any hope of getting lucky. She took a horse stance, squatted down, and put the shield on her left arm in front of her. Her two S-shaped legs were like two compressed springs, ready to withstand the impact at any time. At the same time, she directly activated her invincibility. However, Illidan still came. The incomparably sharp Azanatha's warblade was close to the ground, and a strange emerald green light swept out. It looked like it was going to cut off Imriel's legs. Her hoofs gritted her teeth and suddenly sat down. She wanted to smash the lower edge of the shield into the ground to block this strange blade. Who would have thought that the egg blades were only called egg blades when they were in pairs? Before the second hand that slashed over could even cut, it seemed to have triggered some strange special effect of the twin blades. The main hand's warblade of Azanoth actually slashed at an even higher and more exaggerated speed. If one had to describe the speed of this move, it would be lightning. When ordinary strong people saw this green light, their heads would already be flying into the sky. Yes, it was that fast. This was the speed of a blade that had gone through millions of times of practice to reach the realm of God. She was dead. Illidan was so sure. Chapter 1497. What happened next made everyone who saw it speechless. If Illidan's slash had missed and his all-out attack had been dodged by Imriel, he might have admitted that Imriel had grown into an unimaginably strong enemy in the short but intense battle. But the person who changed the course of this deadly attack was Duke Marcus. This made Illidan unable to accept it. What made it even more difficult for his pride to accept was that Duque had caught his warblade of Azanoth between his fingers. That's right. Duque had used his mortal body to catch Illidan's lightning-fast attack. Even though it was not as gentle as a butterfly's wing, Duque had paid a huge price. His entire left hand had exploded in order to catch this dark-powered divine weapon. His skin and muscles were torn apart, leaving only the bones and tendons of his fingers filled with arcane energy. But Illidan still felt that the time and space around him had frozen, and he greedily breathed in the hot air. How is this possible? Illidan panted in a barely audible voice. He tried hard to restrain his body that was about to tremble as he recalled the unbelievable scene in front of him. He had slashed as fast as he could. He was fast, but Duque was even faster. Because he was so focused on killing Imriel, he had neglected a very important detail. Duque, who was dozens of steps away, did not move. But in fact, Duque had moved. Duque had left a real illusion on the spot, and then his entire body was in a state of invisibility, followed by the fire element blazing haste and haste. When a demigod-level mage used this skill, his speed was too fast. No haste potion in the world could achieve this effect. Even with Illidan's dynamic vision, he could still see a series of afterimages left behind by Duque's speed. His strike could be said to have arrived first even though he had launched it later. Who knew that Duke's strike was even more terrifying than his? Duke had caught up to him from dozens of steps away after he had launched his strike. Duke threw away the staff in his hand and used his left hand to grab his divine weapon warblade. Initially, he thought that he could cut off Imriel's neck in Duque's hand. It turned out that he had thought too much. On the blade that he had extended, there were indeed 3 fingers that were very characteristic of the Scourge army: thumb, index, and middle fingers. Moreover, he did not grab the blade from the front, but bent his wrist and grabbed the back of the blade from the back. He did not enter the path of the blade but caught up with the speed of Azanatha's warblade. While the main hand of Azanatha's warblade was grabbed by Duque, the other hand's blade collided with Imriel's shield. At this critical moment, Duque's right hand suddenly lit up with the brightest golden light. That was the holy light of the demon slayer in Duque's hand. At this critical moment, Duque's right hand suddenly lit up with the brightest golden light. That was the holy light of the demon slayer in Duque's hand. Looking at the rapidly magnifying golden light in his field of vision at this moment, it was too late. Illidan used all his strength. Whether he continued to slash forward, pull back or dodge left and right, he could not escape this attack. The slow spell that Duke had just cast made Illidan feel like he was pulling on a chain that was tied to a mountain. His extremely slow and heavy body made it impossible for him to escape. If Illidan's attack was said to be as fast as lightning, then Duque had forcefully reduced Illidan's speed to the level of a snail, and then used the speed of a tortoise to demonstrate what it meant to be relatively fast as lightning. Under normal circumstances, Illidan would not have been hit by this attack no matter what. However, Duque's attack made him feel even more pain and despair. Duque's face was emotionless. He did not show any deep hatred for the elven traitor, nor did he show any sympathy for him. He did not show any gloating over his impending fall, nor did he show any smugness of getting rid of a rival in love. Instead, Duque had a strange look that said, "I understand you, but don't blame me." Illidan was suddenly stunned. He remembered the various magical things about Duque and the legend that Duque claimed to have peeped into the future in the River of Time. Could it be that Duque really understands me? There was no time for Illidan to think about life. The gorgeous golden sword finally pierced into Illidan's chest. Anyone could see that it was where Illidan's heart was. The sharp blade pierced through, but the pain of the sharp weapon was secondary. The burning holy power entering his chest was the biggest source of pain for the half-demon Illidan. Unable to bear it, Illidan let out the most tragic howl. Almost instinctively, Illidan made a dying counterattack against Duque. Duque barely managed to block the main attack of the twin blades of Azeroth, with its ice barrier. However, the offhand of the blade flashed past, and the entire right arm of the humanoid puppet that looked like Duque flew into the sky. Duque stumbled back. Illidan still did not admit defeat. He threw away the blade in his left hand and held the hilt with his right hand, trying to pull out the demon slayer. At this time, Imriel, who had just recovered from his daze, heard Duque's command, "Hoof, go. Smash the hilt." Heroes were heroes because they had the courage that mortals could only look up to. Even though he had just escaped from being decapitated again, Imriel's legs under his bow suddenly straightened, and his whole body shot out like a cannonball. "Go to hell, so-called king of the outlands." Hoof used the shield to forcefully block Illidan's main blade, raised the warhammer high in the air, drew a beautiful golden arc in the air, and used the last bit of strength in his body to smash the bottom of the hilt. Like a hammer hitting a nail, the demon slayer, which was originally only halfway into Illidan's chest, finally broke through Illidan's extremely strengthened demonic body, pierced through his chest and came out from his back. That was not all. The powerful impact nailed Illidan to the ground. Just a moment ago, Illidan did not understand why Duque was so stupid as to throw away his staff and take the blow with his own body. Now he understood. Atish was much more valuable than Duque, a human puppet. And Atish, which was thrown out, did not go anywhere. It was now standing behind him. This divine artifact staff with rare spatial characteristics had already sealed the entire space around it. Illidan's storm rage had nowhere to run. Impossible. How could you even calculate this? Illidan's eyes were red. He roared and struggled, only to find that he was like a nailed frog. He could not move at all on the ground that had been solidified by spatial magic. The dark energy in his body flowed out of his body like a flood. Chapter 1498. Illidan was fading rapidly. At this time, the experts had already broken free from their predicament and surrounded him again. If Illidan had forcibly transformed himself back into his previous night elf form in pursuit of speed, then Illidan could no longer maintain his demon form and became like an elf. Unfortunately, the shriveled bat wings, the demonic hooves that were beginning to degenerate into toes, and the shrunken demonic horns made Illidan look a little out of place. Demon. Die. Hoof raised his warhammer high, obviously wanting to smash Illidan's head into a watermelon. Wait. Duque grabbed the hoof's wrist with his left hand. His hoofs trembled as if he had been electrocuted. Originally, a young girl being grabbed by a skeleton-like hand was definitely a horrifying and disgusting thing. Unfortunately, It was this broken palm that brought back Imriel's memories from a few seconds ago. If it wasn't for this hand, I would have been beheaded already, the dreamy-eyed girl shouted in her heart. She didn't know when her heart had started to ripple. She lowered her head and acquiesced to Duque's actions. Ah, Illidan was still struggling, but at this time he looked extremely ridiculous. At this time even Maiev had put away her metal sawtooth wheel, but half of her face was still covered in frost. Everyone could see that Illidan's injuries were severe but not fatal. Commander Marcus, this traitor is too cunning. Please allow me to execute Illidan immediately. At least Maiev hadn't completely lost his mind because of hatred. He understood that the decision was now in the hands of Duque, the commander of the alliance. Duque secretly let out a sigh of relief. At least when Akuma went to save Maiev, he first told her about the alliance's situation. That was the right move. Duque raised his chin slightly. If Sir Shadowsong wishes to kill a demon, I naturally have no objections. But it seemed that Illidan's storm rage was not a simple demon. After all, not a single demon in a weakened state can survive a full-powered strike from me, not even Archimonde. At this moment, everyone remembered that Duque was the hero who had personally stabbed Archimonde in the back on Mount Hyjal and killed the commander of the Burning Legion. Moreover, the holy light in front of them was real. Duke and Irel's holy light was as powerful as a nuclear bomb to a demon's vital organs. Illidan was still alive. It could only be said that the part of him that was an elf was still the majority, and the appearance of a demon was just a facade. Hearing Duque's words, Ma Sun was speechless. At this moment Tyrande hurriedly appeared. She borrowed Duque's strength to cast a projection. Maiev Shadowsong. Thank you for your efforts in pursuing Illidan. But Commander Marcus was right. Since Illidan's main body is still a night elf, he must receive a fair and just trial for his betrayal. Duque pursed his lips. Did you hear that? Maiev Shadowsong. Yes. Maev's hands were trembling and she clenched her teeth tightly. Duque stepped forward and whispered to Maiev, if a hunter no longer has prey, then a hunter is no longer a hunter. Do you understand what I mean? This time Maev's whole body visibly trembled. I understand. Duque smiled. Very good. Before Illidan's trial by the Alliance Assembly, I will leave him to you, Your Excellency Maiev Shadowsong. Don't worry. Maiev immediately displayed her profound skills as a warden. First she took out a pair of glittering golden shackles and locked Illidan's limbs. Then Duque used an arm made of holy elements to pull out the Demon Slayer sword. Illidan shouted, Kill me. Kill me. I am the king of the Outlands. I am Illidan who slaughtered countless orcs in Draenei. Kill me. A king should not suffer such humiliation. Maev's face was cold. You are not AF** king. You are just a shameful traitor. As she said that, she stuffed Illidan's mouth with a piece of ragged cloth. This scene made Tyrande, who was watching from Karazhan, worried. Since Illidan had been defeated, there was no need to worry about the rest of the small fries. Duque gave a slightly strange order. Destroy all demons, but try to capture as many of the Illidari demon hunters as possible. Hoof did not understand. Why not kill these fallen ones who have fallen into evil and use dark energy as their power? Whether they fall or not depends not on what they say or what power they use, but on what they do. If the final result proves that they are actually on the side of justice, and that they have done more than the sacrifice, then I think they can be forgiven for what they have done. When Imriel heard this, she shook her head forcefully. I'm sorry, Duque. I cannot agree with your point of view. I think we may have a very big difference of opinion. Difference of opinion. Duque smiled. At the same time he turned into the dark and entered the shadow form of a priest. Duque's ability to use the conflicting powers of holy and shadow form at the same time was enough to shock Hoof. What shocked Hoof even more was what Duque said next. What if I told you that the Alliance Commander Duke Marcus standing before you not only knows how to use dark energy, but was also a high-tier Void Lord of the Twisting Nether? You. Imriel felt that something that he had been holding on to was crumbling. What if I told you that I used this to infiltrate the Burning Legion, and finally blew up Sardra's largest fortress in the Twisted Nether during the Ancient War, killing at least 5 billion demons? Duque's casual words had a huge impact on Hoof's heart. Every Draenei could count their own history. They knew how many times their race had managed to avert disaster. One of the most unsolved mysteries was that in a battle 10,000 years ago, The Burning Legion had clearly gained the upper hand, but they suddenly withdrew all the demons and let go of an easy victory. This was known as the greatest mystery. Now this eternal mystery seemed to have an answer. Imriel was completely stunned. No, not just Imriel, even Illidan, who was struggling as Maiev dragged him away from the platform of the Black Shrine, was deeply shocked. Duque's words echoed in his mind over and over again. At this moment, Illidan was finally sure that Duque, who was more like a demon than Jaden, who was best at scheming, must have guessed his thoughts. Of course, he also guessed that Duque was explaining to him what kind of situation he and Tyron were in back then. Duque, you bastard. Illidan was very agitated as he struggled. Maev's eyes showed clear disgust and he kicked Illidan in the head. Shut up, you traitor. Chapter 1499. Victory. Long live. The wild dwarf drank from a bag of liquor and fired into the sky. For our world. The heroic orc beat his chest with force. Karabayer. We're back. The sentimental Drenii knelt in the corners of the temple and cried bitterly. Illidan's capture symbolized the end of the Allied army's outland expedition. All that was left was to clean up the remnants of the Allied army. This was very different from the historical alliance. The original alliance would at most send some guys on horseback to the various cities and towns to declare victory. In this life, Duque was in power, and the alliance's approach was more open and transparent. During the days of the alliance's battle, almost every day, there would be thieves or hunters who were specially named by Duque as Hong Kong reporters, reporting back to the front lines of the alliance in Azeroth. From the simplest march in hard life, to the laying of railroad tracks, to the battle at Hellfire Citadel, and then to opening the passage to Shotrath City, followed by the elimination of the Fell Orcs in the battle at Moonshadow Valley. As long as it was a town or factory with more than 1,000 people, there would be a special mage team stationed to report in the form of magic images and audio. Even smaller villages would use a method similar to newspapers for publicity. Although in order to control, Duque deliberately delayed the report by 3 days. Of course, this could also be attributed to the inconvenience of communication in the Outland. But for the people of Azeroth, this was definitely something new. Just like what Duque had always emphasized to the higher-ups of the Alliance. We don't just need the soldiers to know what they're fighting for. We also need the people to know where their labor, their taxes have gone to. Only then will our soldiers take the initiative to fight, and our people will work with their lives on the line. Duque had run the Alliance for so many years, and the Alliance was already quite used to the wartime economy. Once the war started, they would immediately implement various plans, greatly reducing the supply of luxury goods and increasing the production of military goods. Thanks to the Alliance's current strong economic and agricultural strength, there was no need for a food rationing system within the Alliance. They only prohibited merchants from selling food in bulk across borders. All merchants must have a permit and sell food and specialty fruits and vegetables on time. In almost all the military industries and logistics industries, the workers automatically and consciously worked overtime, and many workers even proposed to waive overtime pay. The people of the Alliance had no regrets because they knew that they were contributing to this righteous war. It was because of their efforts that the frontline soldiers could eat canned food of various tastes, live in tents and sleep in warm sleeping bags. Because there were reports from the front line and every piece of military equipment had a unique number. Therefore, from time to time, there would be old workers or aunties who were pleasantly surprised to discover in the news that a certain sleeping bag or a certain shovel was made by themselves. That sense of participation was incomparable to any of the previous wars. Even though they were separated by countless light years, the people in the rear still felt that their hearts were connected to the soldiers on the front lines. The logistics unit had specially vacated a special train so that the soldiers could write letters to their families every week. It was also very well received. So when news of victory came from the Outer Realm, the entire Alliance cheered. Hooray! Victory! Long live the Alliance! Long live Commander Marcus! Long live His Majesty Rin! Looking at the Alliance flags that were stuck all over the Darkness Shrine, while the people cheered, they also noticed the report that was inserted in between the victory announcements. It was the image of the evil human body modification experiment sent from the Darkness Shrine. The scene of blood flowing, the taboo scene of forced intercourse with the blood fiends, almost crossed the magic mirror and pounced on the people. Although the broadcaster, Bishop Sally Whitemane, had already solemnly reminded the people before the broadcast that the following scene was quite bloody, many people still felt extremely uncomfortable. There were number 18 prohibitions in the Alliance. Most of the current generation of Alliance youths were born during the war at the Dark Portal. In addition, the previous generation had been ravaged by war, so no one felt that there was anything wrong with the Alliance broadcasting this. At most, mothers would leave with their frightened children. Oh my god. That's too scary. Damn it, I can't imagine what would happen if millions of such monsters swarmed into Azeroth. Holy light above, I finally understand why the Alliance spends so much money every year to defend the Dark Portal and strengthen the Watchtower. The Alliance could be said to be united now with full support. Even if Duque slapped his forehead and suddenly brainlessly held a general election or something, he would probably be elected with 99% of the votes. The end of the war was the end of a stage for the people, but for the higher-ups of the Alliance and the Horde, there were as many things to be done. The Horde was busy migrating people out of Draenor, which was about to be destroyed, and so were the Draenei. As the new leader of the Draenei, Imriel personally defeated Illidan as soon as he came to power. He helped the Draenei reclaim the Darkness Shrine and renamed it the Karabeir Shrine. This made Imriel's position suddenly stabilized. Although it was impossible to invest any manpower and resources in the Karabeir Shrine because of the collapse of Draenor, it was completely different to give up on the shrine and snatch it from someone else and then tell them that they didn't want it. With Duque's reminder, the Draenei also began to prepare for the migration of the entire tribe. The initial plan was to fly the Eye to Mystic Blue Island in Azeroth. This was completely different from history. In history, it was a dumb guy who listened to an egg's order to kill the Draenei, and the Draenei were desperate, so they flew a spaceship that looked like a large escape pod to Azeroth. In this life, it was the Draenei who methodically flew the entire spaceship to Azeroth. This was a completely different concept. Duque and the higher-ups of the Alliance all believed that with the Eye, they would definitely be able to strengthen the air defense around Darnassus. After a busy day, Duque finally left Karazhan's command room and returned to his bedroom. After becoming a demigod, the physical fatigue would no longer exist. Now it was just that there were too many things to do and he was mentally tired. As soon as he returned to his room, Duque felt that something was wrong. The room was very dark. Someone had turned the magic lights to the darkest. Then Duque was shocked. He was not surprised that there were maids, dragons and maids in his room. But for this high priest who suddenly appeared wearing a nude apron, Duque was really shocked. Damn, could it be that the little notebook I hid under the bed that I wrote when I was bored has been found? Tyron smiled charmingly and gently cupped her face with her left hand. Pie dear, you're back? Then do you want to eat first or take a bath first? Or eat first? What about me? Chapter 1500. There's such a benefit. Duque's eyes lit up. When he first taught Tyron, she refused no matter what. After 10,000 years, even though Tyron had accumulated a lot of pressure, there was a subtle change in their standpoints. From an ill-fated relationship to a true relationship, Duque never forced Tyron to do anything she didn't want to. In the harem, it was undeniable that Duque was very interested in Tyron. From a priestess who was as pure as ice and jade, to slowly tormenting her, and the millions of night elves outside worshipping his woman. This feeling was as if he was scribbling on a piece of white paper, smearing it with traces that belonged only to him and then framing it up. A bunch of ignorant bystanders would worship it as a holy object. That kind of domineering monopolization and flaunting was displayed to the fullest. It was a pity that due to work they didn't spend much time together after reuniting. In order to cherish the opportunity, Duque rarely asked Tyron to do anything special. Usually Tyron would do whatever she wanted to do. Who would have thought that Tyron would actually dig out his little notebook and become a self-taught genius? Even though Duque had purposely stayed there to see which genius would come and try it out, Duque had thought that Vashti would make the first move. He didn't expect Tyron to be the first to taste the crab. Even though he knew why Tyron was here, the sly Duque didn't hesitate to eat the sugar coating first. Duque smiled like a fox. Which one do you think I should choose? For once, Tyron was immersed in her role. She had a vexed look on her face as she placed her hands above her abdomen, her fingers chattering anxiously. Oh, I just remembered that I forgot to cook dinner and run the bathwater. What should I do? Damn. Let's play. I'll give you 101 points. I'm not afraid of you getting arrogant with an extra point. Duque immediately attacked, pulling Tyrant over with a fake version of Death's Grasp. Without saying anything, he used 5 armor penetration. Tyrant was a cloth-armored class, so her armor was low. Now it was almost 0. Annoying. Are you really annoying or just pretending? Fake. Yo, big sister, you're courting death. Duque laughed heartily. Very good. It wasn't easy for me to cultivate a demigod body, and now I can finally put it to good use. Very quickly, Tyrant was first hit by Bewitched. Then, as if she had been hit by Flaming Storm, her entire body was engulfed in heat. Faced with Duque's charge, Tyrant hurriedly activated Suppression and shouted, "You dare?" At the same time, he activated Swift Sprint and ran away. You're asking me if I'm touched? Of course I dare to move. Duque immediately used Backstab on Tyrant, who had accidentally fallen to the ground in an oars pose. The feeling of being stabbed repeatedly made Dumuk cry, which he hadn't felt for a long time. It felt so good. This was an unlimited backstab with unlimited energy. Once upon a time, Duque had envied those thieves who could hide behind the boss and stab it infinitely. Now he had also become a thief. Yes, the kind that stole people's hearts. The flag duel had once again proven his martial arts skills. Once the godly sword was unleashed, the world would be shocked. Duque was satisfied. After defeating the fairy, Tyrant curled up in Duque's arms like a cat. Duque. Yes. Thank you. Duque did not say anything. He just gently stroked Tyrant's soft and bright hair. Once upon a time, Duque thought that such a head of bright green hair would look very exaggerated. But after looking at it for a long time, he felt that it was very unique and pleasing to the eye. After being together for so long, Duque naturally did not suspect that Tyrant still had feelings for Illidan. It was just a kind of attachment, a bond that could not be severed as they grew up together. Tyrant also did not doubt whether Duque would execute Illidan. She knew very well that if Duque wanted someone dead, he would not show mercy on the spot. He would not hold a trial later and make her feel uncomfortable. When Duque pierced Illidan's chest, it looked like he was aiming for his heart, but in reality, it was in the narrow space between his heart and his left lung. If it was a thicker weapon, Illidan would probably be dead. Duque's Demon Slayer sword was obviously a piercing sword. Since such a large amount of holy light directly into Illidan's heart did not kill him, Duque would not stab him again. So this time Tyrant's apron play was to thank Duque. The next meeting of the Alliance leaders was the same. In Storm Fortress, Duque spoke passionately. I used holy light that was enough to kill Archimonde, the commander of the Burning Legion, and pierced Illidan's chest. After that, Archbishop Imriel used the same powerful holy light attack, but it did not kill Illidan. Instead, it purified the demonic blood in his body. So I do not think that Illidan is truly evil. Here I object to Illidan Stormrage's execution. Imriel could not sit still and stood up on the spot. Wait. What about the tens of thousands of Draenei that Illidan killed during the time he informed Draenor? What about the blood debt of my people? Duque was silent for 2 seconds, then sighed. Archbishop Imriel, between countries, between races, it is not just simple hatred. In the face of a stronger enemy, we must all learn to let go of our hatred. Every leader and king present had experienced the cruelest battle at the door of darkness. Every one of us had friends or family who died at the hands of the orcs. Because of the existence of the Burning Legion, now we have no choice but to form an alliance with the orcs. This time, it was Imriel's turn to be silent, but the stubbornness in her heart made her raise her head again. What if the Draenei insist on Illidan Stormrage's death? The hall fell into a dead silence. Tyrant secretly clenched her fists. To her, in front of the High Duke, she had no position to oppose the Draenei's pursuit. At this time Jaina spoke up. The alliance is an interracial multi-kingdom alliance that aims to maintain peace and security in Azeroth. Our aim is to seek common ground while reserving differences. If we cannot resolve the problem through discussion, we can only vote at the throne conference. The minority must obey the majority. When the results are out, any country or race will only have 2 choices. One is to accept and the other is to choose to leave the alliance. Also, when the Draenei first joined the alliance, they did not ask for the alliance to kill Illidan Stormrage for the Draenei. They only asked for the survival and safety of the race. The The Alliance has no obligation to start a war of revenge for the Drenii. After all, this was before the Drenii joined the Alliance. Imriel was speechless. Whether she was a leader or a politician, she was too inexperienced. Chapter 1501. At this time, Duque rolled his eyes at Jaina. Jaina immediately knew that she had gone too far with her words. Too far? Perhaps so. But Jaina did not regret it. In Jaina's eyes, this Drenii girl did not understand politics or a country at all. Without Valen, the Drenii race would not be of much use to the Alliance. Their population was small and their combat power was low. Their once advanced technology had all been lost and could not be used at all. Valen, the only person who knew the secrets of the Eredar clan, had been sucked into the soul box. As for the Naru, they were two different races. If they had the heart to persuade the Naru, once the Naru and Drenii were separated, the Drenii would be a burden to the Alliance. In a situation where there was no political leverage, Imriel still insisted on Illidan's death. Putting aside the relationship between Illidan and Tyrant, just the fact that Duque did not make a move meant that there must be a reason behind it. This girl who looked like Eredar was really stupid. Jaina raised her chin slightly and stuck out her nose. She did not speak. In the throne room there was a strange silence. This time not only Imriel but even Merid, who was beside Imriel, felt that something was wrong. If one had to describe the atmosphere, it would be estrangement. There was an invisible barrier between Imriel, the leader of the Drenii, and the other leaders of the Alliance, but everyone could feel it. Merid, who was standing beside Imriel, used his elbow to poke Imriel's arm. Imriel finally understood. She raised her head and said in a clear voice, "I am sorry. If I do not execute Illidan, who is stained with the blood of my people, I cannot answer to my people. If there is a special reason, I am willing to listen." Imriel's attitude was neither humble nor arrogant, and she received praise from many leaders of the Alliance. At least, Master Craftsman Jurban and Kudran looked at her with approval. "All right." Duque sighed deeply. "All leaders with voting rights, please stay. The rest, please leave for now." Everyone's heart skipped a beat. It was rare for a throne conference to take such a confidential measure. This meant that what Duque was about to say was the absolute secret of the Alliance, or even the entire Azeroth. Merid had a strange expression on his face, but when he saw that even Aurelia, Vashj, and other non-core leaders had left, he had no choice but to leave as well. Soon there were only a dozen people left in the large hall. The atmosphere became heavy, and what made the leaders feel even more pressured was that the will of the moon goddess Elune had descended. Duque explained, "The following content concerns the survival of Azeroth, so please swear in the name of the moon goddess Elune that you will not reveal a single word of what you are about to hear. If you violate the oath, the mighty power of the goddess lurking in your souls will burn your souls to ashes." "I swear." The leaders swore one after another. They immediately felt a gentle yet resolute strength enter their souls. After everyone swore, Duque received Elune's message. Then Duque raised his hand and suddenly a huge arcane barrier rose from Duque's body. In this huge blue sphere, all elements that did not belong to Duque were forcibly expelled. Then Duque's eyes swept across the leaders repeatedly like lightning. It was not an ordinary gaze. This divine gaze easily saw through everyone's body, from clothes to skin, to subcutaneous tissues, to internal organs and even souls. Although Duque had left everything to the system elves, every leader felt as if they had been completely seen through. Duque's women did not feel that it was a big problem, but Imriel's cheeks suddenly turned crimson. "Right, it should be safe now. If even a true god and a demigod like this can cause problems, then there's nothing we can do about Azeroth." Duque sighed. "What I'm going to say next is that Illidan is probably the key to our destruction of the Burning Legion. This possibility is 99%. After Illidan was captured, he did not say a word. His tight-lipped attitude infuriated Maiev. He neither denied nor admitted to the accusations of his crimes. When he was scolded, he would occasionally retort to Maiev. As for his interrogation, it could be said that there was no progress at all. Just because he did not say anything did not mean that Duque did not know. After carefully examining Illidan's body, Duque finally confirmed that Illidan, as in history, just happened to be doing his own thing when the Alliance attacked the Outland. When the Alliance had not attacked the Outland, Illidan began to secretly implement his own plan during the time when the Alliance reorganized the army. He trained a group of demon hunters and formed Illidan, waiting for the opportunity to attack the Legion's world. Among them, Illidan personally led the attack on the Dreadlord's home planet, Nazriza, and stole the Seal of Argus from the archives. This device allowed Illidan to directly enter Argus, the common home of Eridar and the Draenei, and the current headquarters of the Legion. Knowing that Nazriza was attacked, the Burning Legion immediately sent a large number of reinforcements here, and Illidan was waiting for this moment. He forcibly tore open his own portal. So the world changed just like when Nazul turned Draenor into a broken outland. The turbulent energy tore Nazriza apart, and the entire planet exploded into pieces. Because this planet was in the void, the souls of countless demon hunters were destroyed along with their bodies, and could no longer be resurrected. The Legion was furious, and in order to retaliate, they opened more portals in the Outland. Just at this time, the Alliance and the Horde sent a large-scale army to attack the Dark Portal and came to the Outland. Demon Lord Kuril planned to set a trap for the Azeroth army on the Hellfire Peninsula, surround and annihilate them. However, Illidan discovered his plan and successfully thwarted the siege. Using the Seal of Argus, Illidan projected his soul into Kill Jaden's palace. But before he could do anything, he was discovered by Kill Jaden. Just as he was about to be caught and his identity was about to be revealed, a mysterious voice sent Illidan's soul back to his own body. Illidan then met the oldest Narazila, and learned all the secrets of Sargeras, the Burning Legion, and the true darkness lurking in the void. But Illidan refused to say anything. It didn't matter. After Duque confirmed that he was one of them, he naturally had a way to help him get away with it. I once asked Lord Valen about the Eridar's home planet, Argus. I found out a lot of interesting things. For example, the defense mode there and the quality of the earth there. Lord Valen even used telepathy to send me an image of Argus. Chapter 1502. It was Argus's information. The leaders all stared at the image of Argus, trying to imprint the scene into their minds. It was a beautiful and high-tech world full of Azeroth that all races could not understand. Of course, all of this was purely an image from 25,000 years ago when Argus had not been split. However, there were many things that would not change, such as the palaces of Archimonde and Kill Jaden. Duque pointed to a place. Everyone, please pay attention to this place. Everyone noticed that it was a brick with a psychedelic color. Then Duque took out a small stone from his dimensional bag. The stone was very small, but under the magnification of the magnifying glass, everyone immediately recognized that this small stone was the same color as the brick of Kill Jaden's palace in the image. When we attacked the Outland, Illidan went to Kill Jaden's palace. That doesn't prove anything, right? William said neutrally. Duque did not refute. He first summarized the defense system of Kill Jaden's palace and made it into a list for everyone to see. Then he took out a magic mirror photo. Everyone look at the mark on Illidan's leg. This time everyone did not speak. Duque said again, the question is, if it was a normal summon, why would it trigger the defense system of Kill Jaden's palace? Imriel clenched her fists and did not speak. Duque switched the image. It was a group of night elves with partial demonic appearances. Now look at Illidan's Illidarii army. They call themselves demon hunters, not half-demons. We have confirmed that the method used by this group of demon hunters is to kill a powerful demon, then extract the essence of the demon's soul, seal it with a special magic and suppress it in their own bodies. This way they obtain the powerful strength of the demon. Please note that the souls of the demons that are treated in this way cannot return to the twisting nether and be resurrected. Every leader had the same question in their hearts. Would the Burning Legion really let Illidan do this? Please note that after I and the former Archbishop of the Holy Light, Alonso's fail, the souls of the demons that they used included powerful demons like the Lesser Void Lords. When I fought in the Ancient War, there were only 1,000 demon overlords in the Twisting Nether. At this point, everyone had a more reasonable judgment in their hearts. Whether or not Illidan was against the Burning Legion was another matter. At the very least, he was definitely not loyal. Duque really wanted to say something like, when I returned from the Ancient War, I was fortunate enough to peek into Azeroth's future from the River of Time. I saw Illidan in the middle of planet Azeroth, which is now the location of the Great Maelstrom, fighting against the Burning Legion. But after some consideration, Duque said another version of the statement. The situation in front of us now is that Illidan's strength has reached the level of an intermediate Void Lord. None of us here have the power to completely destroy his soul. If we kill him, his soul will return to the twisting nether. If he is our enemy, then he can still be resurrected by Kill Jaden. At most, his strength will be reduced a little, but he can still continue to attack Azeroth. At this point, Duque made his final statement. On the other hand, if he is really what we think he is, then a living Illidan is more valuable than a dead one. This time, Imriel really had nothing to say, but she raised another question. Alright, I accept the reason for not killing Illidan. But how should I appease my people? After saying that, Imriel lowered her head deeply. The Draenei girl's depression made Duque sigh. Duque said, next, Elun and I can focus on researching the soul casket and let Valen's soul see the light of day again. If he is a prophet, he will probably have no problem appeasing the Draenei. Before Valen fled, he had been one of the 3 leaders of Eredar for thousands of years. In addition to the time he fled, he had a reputation of 30,000 years. How could a rookie leader like Imriel compare to him? This was already the best result. Duque clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. Alright, I think there is no need for the throne to vote now. The leaders all smiled and shook their heads. At this time Jaina spoke. But if we use the holy light as a reason to pardon Illidan, it will be easily seen through by the Burning Legion, right? Tyrande, who had been silent all this while, clenched her fists and suddenly looked up. Just as she was about to say that she would pardon Illidan in her name, Duque shook his head and smiled. I will talk to Isra and tell him that Malfurion Stormrage pleaded with Isra to not execute Illidan. Then let Isra claim to have seen some kind of revelation. This time everyone laughed. Only Duke would dare to use the Dragon Clan as a pretense. The dragon race already had a lot of power. Isra, who was in charge of the Emerald Dream, was Cenarius' adoptive mother, and was also the big boss behind the Night Elf Druid religion. With Isra's appearance, the Night Elves would not dare to say anything. Secondly, the dragon race was used to being arrogant. Who would dare to object and confront the dragon race themselves? Anyway, with Duque's good relationship with the dragon race, anyone who objected would not be able to do anything about it. Perhaps this was the privilege of the Guardians of Azeroth. When Duque said this, Tyrande immediately gave him a look of infinite gratitude. Duque knew that he would be in luck again. Under Duque's manipulation, the impact of Illidan's imprisonment was minimized to the greatest extent. Firstly, Illidan did not attack any race on the Azeroth continent, whether it was the Night Elves or humans. Secondly, the only Draenei who had a deep hatred for Illidan, as well as some Draenor orcs, were all attracted by one thing. Duque and Elun worked together to open the soul box, and as a result, a strange situation appeared. The souls of the former Great Chief Orgrim and the Draenei Prophet Willan were both trapped in the soul box and could not come out. Both of them used their powerful spiritual power to control the souls in the soul box, but like conjoined twins, they could not be separated at all. Now, if the tribe wanted to communicate with Orgrim, the Great Chief had to come out. If they wanted to find Willan, then Willan had to come out. Alright, now both sides could not do without these two. Then what should they do? After some discussion, because the soul box was the Draenei's artifact, the soul box was handed over to the Alliance for safekeeping. The safekeeping place was in Theramore, supervised by Jaina. If the tribe wanted to find Orgrim, they could also come over. It was not too far away. Usually, the tribe could have a small team stationed in Theramore as warehouse managers. Chapter 1503. Illidan was not executed? Death is not the harshest punishment for an evil person. And we need to be clear who is our real enemy. Who is the evil enemy that forced us to leave our homeland and wander the universe for 25,000 years? In the magic mirror, the Draenei saw the translucent Valen bathed in golden holy light, guiding them as usual. Countless Draenei wept bitterly, thanking the mirror image's direction. A new era has arrived. It's rare for us to meet a powerful organization that has the same beliefs as us and is willing to protect us. The Alliance. We should cherish this opportunity, recuperate, and advance hand in hand with the Alliance. Valen's position in the hearts of the Draenei was unparalleled. The reputation he had accumulated for 30,000 years was not something a new leader like Imriel could compare to. The problem was, Valen was dead and he could not come out of the soul casket for 24 hours, because it would be an unnecessary burden on his soul. If he could not suppress the resentful souls, Valen's soul might be destroyed as well. This special situation made it impossible for Valen to continue as the leader of the Draenei. It was because of this awkward situation that Imriel's ascension to the throne was inevitable. In addition to Valen's support for his disciple, it could be said that unless Imriel caused trouble with the alliance, her position as leader was as stable as a mountain. In Theramore's newly built soul tower, Imriel knelt on a cushion-like object in front of the soul casket. In front of her was Valen's kind figure. "Teacher, I am troubled. Please speak. Teaching and answering questions is a teacher's duty. I was busy with the survival of the race and neglected to teach you. Now is not the worst, at least I have more time to teach you and the other Karabear apprentices." Imriel looked at the exquisite soul casket that looked like a carved box. "What I said to you, will His Excellency Orgrim hear it? He can't hear what I don't want him to hear. This is my pride." When it came to how to use soul power, Eridar was the one who was the best. "It's about the Alliance's throne meeting." Imriel fidgeted anxiously with her fingers. She may be a leader now, but in front of Valen she would always be a student who never grew up. "What? Does the Alliance have policies that are not beneficial to the Draenei?" "No, it's not. However, Merritt told me that since this was an alliance of many countries and races, the Draenei needed to find strong allies in order to increase their authority within the Alliance. But no matter how hard I try, I can't make any progress." Imriel began to count with his fingers. "Dwarves and gnomes don't care about the way of the holy light. After I explained that we had lost those high-tech legacies, they only cared about the quality and quantity of our holy water." The Night Elves. It seems that Illidan, who I wanted to kill before, was the childhood friend of High Priestess Tyrant. Tyrant might hate me a little now, so she's doing everything according to the rules. But the settlement that the Alliance assigned to us, the Draenei, is near Darnassus. On the human side, His Majesty Varian Rin was lukewarm towards my visit. He then said that the Stormwind Kingdom was not responsible for the affairs of the Draenei, and refused to further communicate with me about religion and military affairs. Then there's the problem. The three Windrunner sisters of the Blood Elves, Queen Menethil of Lordaeron, Queen Berev of Alterac, and Queen Proudmoore of Kul Tiras seem to have formed an invisible alliance that I can't see, but I can feel, and they are collectively alienating the Draenei. Although they don't seem to treat the Draenei well, I feel that they are more enthusiastic about the tribe than the Draenei. This is not a good feeling. After that, Imriel continued to talk about what she had seen and heard after joining the Alliance. When Imriel finished, even Valen couldn't help but ponder. The experienced Valen, of course, immediately realized that the Draenei were being subtly resisted. And everything started from Imriel's request to execute Illidan according to the wishes of the Draenei people. It didn't feel like this was the intention of Duque or Tyrant, but the resistance was real. From the current situation, it could be judged that the Alliance had the most financial resources. The Marcus family directly under Duque, the Sea Kingdom of Kul Tiras, and the Trade Alliance Alterac. There was also Lordaeron, which had better grain production. The Marcus family had already done their best to support this outland expedition. The only ones who could take care of the migration of the Draenei were the remaining three families. They had spare power, but they didn't do anything. This was definitely a big problem for the Draenei. Even if the Draenei didn't collapse immediately, they couldn't stay any longer. After defeating Illidan and his forces, Thrall had rescued his fellow orcs, so it was inevitable that the army would retreat. The remaining Draenei would definitely not be able to withstand the next attack of the Burning Legion. Other than Azeroth, which had the anti-Titan planet magic circle, the Draenei had nowhere else to go. If they were to encounter the resistance of the countries within the Alliance, it would be really bad. "My child, have you noticed that the leaders of the countries and forces that are resisting you have one thing in common?" Imriel suddenly realized. "They are all women." "Yes. It's very likely that they have a good relationship with each other. They are best friends or sisters. I suggest that you find them and sincerely apologize. Not only do you give up on pursuing Illidan, but don't mention anything about Vashj." These two did cause great suffering to the Draenei in the past, but now they are within the Alliance. Imriel nodded. In the next few days, Imriel eagerly followed Valen's instructions and went to visit. Unfortunately, it was still of no use. There was no sarcasm, but there were still soft nails sent to the Draenei girls. Imriel originally wanted to find Duque. However, Duque encountered a more critical problem. The Dark Portal, year 24, 2nd of June, Duque received a floating bottle in Karazhan. It was very interesting. This bottle actually followed the flow of the elements in the spacetime rift, entered the only gap that Duque had deliberately left and floated into Karazhan. That was the place where the Virgin Maiden was guarding. Duque used the magician's hand to open the bottle, and suddenly a paragraph of text popped out of the bottle. It formed a line of words in the common language in the void. 10th of May, Isle of Quell, Donna's Morning Star Village. Duque couldn't help but smile. You're finally here. Chapter 1504. The Isle of Quell Donna's, where the Sunwell was located, was once an important place for the High Elves, but now it seemed rather bleak. This could not be helped. After the fall of the Sunstrider royal family and the Silver Moon Council, which represented the supremacy of magic, the Rangers were now in power. Whether it was Servanas who was the queen, the other three Windrunner sisters, Lor Themar or Hadron, they were all Rangers. Although the Rangers did not go as far as to suppress the mages, it was impossible for them to be like the era of Kuel Salis, where mages were respected and all resources were given to mages. The result was that all the factions were happy and only the mages were resentful. But what could they do? It was difficult to find a radiant moon in the country, let alone a breaking dawn. When the Allies achieved complete victory in the Outer Lands and the news that Prince Kael, that's had advanced to the Breaking Dawn rank, the mages in Sindorii rejoiced and demanded the prince's return. Anyone with a discerning eye knew that anyone could return, but not the Sunstrider royal family. Otherwise, where would they put Queen Sylvanas? Kael, that could be considered reasonable and publicly stated, I am guilty. If a felony like betraying the country could be easily forgiven, then anyone could commit treason. If the country needs me, I will rush back to help in the war, but I will never return to Sindorii. This has nothing to do with Her Majesty the Windrunner. It is purely my personal atonement. Instead of returning, Kael, that chose to enter the Dalajan Kirin Tor Parliament again. With the support of Duque and Jaina, he was unanimously elected as the chairman. Duque and Jaina, as well as the still missing Ronin, were nominal members to maintain their influence in the Dalajan. Apart from the mages in Sindorii who were disappointed, it could be said that this was the best outcome for everyone. On the 10th of May, a mysterious figure appeared unexpectedly. His appearance, his attire, and his staff that could not be more typical had evoked the dusty memories of many mages. After some hesitation, countless mages who were supposed to be on duty knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, 100. When the entire Sunwell garrison team knelt before the mysterious man, he opened his arms, a pair of withered arms that had lost all moisture. When his hood was blown off by the wind, a wrinkled face was revealed, as well as a pair of soul flames that came from the netherworld that replaced his eyes. That's right. He was the former Sun King, Anastrian Sunstrider. My subjects, I, Anastrian, have returned. The Sun King roared into the sky. What responded to him was a tsunami of cheers. Long live our king. After appeasing the Blood Elves, no, the High Elves, who had pledged their loyalty to him again, the Sun King came to a secret chamber, and bowed to the two mysterious men who were wrapped in cloaks. My lords, do you see that? My subjects are still loyal, the Sunwell is still under my control. Now will the army accept my conditions? It was a crisp and charming laugh. If the Sun King was not a forgotten person like a salted fish, perhaps even if he was still an old man thousands of years old, his heart would still be moved. The two mysterious men took off their hoods. They were the Eridar twins. The high-grade warlock Elises smiled charmingly. Sir Kil'jaeden will not forget your contributions. Queen Selaras continued. He will never be stingy with rewards for those who are loyal to the army. As long as Sir Kil'jaeden successfully descends with the power of the Sunwell, he can promise on behalf of the army that Azeroth will not be completely destroyed. After getting what the army wants, you will be the king of Azeroth. If there are no problems, then let's sign this soul contract in triplicate. One for you, one for us to take back to the Twisting Nether for archiving, and one for Sir Kil'jaeden. Sign it and you will be a member of the glorious Burning Legion. Sir Kil'jaeden promises to give you the treatment of a mid-tier Void Lord. The Gemini's voice was full of temptation. Most importantly, it was still the will of the Sun King. He hesitated for a moment, then gritted his teeth and signed it. A few big flamboyant words were left on the 3 soul contracts, which also symbolized the fall of his soul. He could clearly feel that as he signed his name, a part of his soul was forcibly separated and flew to the distant void, becoming Kil'jaeden's biggest bargaining chip to control him. This was the price. Anastrian's betrayal was both accidental and inevitable. It was very different from the Forsaken in history. Originally, Queen Sylvanas was the leader in history, and she even turned Lordaeron into the Undercity. In the entire Lordaeron continent, apart from Gilneas and the Eagle Nest Mountain, there were no standard alliance countries. Because of Google's instigation and the escalation of various conflicts, the Alliance and the Horde worked together more because of the situation, and not as closely as they were in this life. In the continuous local and large-scale conflicts, the Forsaken, who were originally at odds with the Alliance, were able to kill a large number of humans and obtain soldiers to replenish their numbers. The Forsaken in this life were miserable. After the Sun King refused to accept the control of the Lich King and became independent, Lordaeron was quickly destroyed by the Alliance army gathered by Duque. The Undercity was destroyed before it was officially established. It was chased across the sea miserably and hid in Winterspring. Winterspring was not a good place either. There were a large number of blue dragonians there, as well as the 2-headed chimeras, who were all extremely ferocious fellows. It was not easy for them to seek refuge with the Horde, and they originally wanted to use the banner of the Horde to check and balance the Alliance. Who knew that under Duque's suppression, the Horde was basically in existence like a lackey. And Cao saw him and his Silvermoon Council as more of a thug. The most annoying thing was that the resurrected Orgrim, who he used as a stepping stone to seek refuge with the Horde, was basically a mountain of his own among the Forsaken. He pulled away all the Death Knights and warriors of Orc origin, and they were more closely united around the Orcs instead of listening to him, the king of the Forsaken. The Horde signed an alliance with the Alliance, and the Forsaken could not find soldiers to replenish themselves. The corpses of the Alliance soldiers could not be converted, and no one in the tribe except for the Orcs cared about him, the Sun King. Even if the Orcs became Death Knights or warriors, they still did not listen to him. In fact, the entire Forsaken tribe was really driven to a dead end. After fighting Silithus, they fought the Outland. Apart from getting a bunch of equipment that was not too superb, the loss of manpower was the most painful thing for the Sun King. The Silvermoon Council, which had been a Forsaken with him, was now only a name, and there were only 2 or 3 of them left. If the proud Sun King wanted to regain his strength and become an overlord, he really could not think of a good way. In desperation, he thought of the Burning Legion. Chapter 1505. Power was one of the sweetest poisons in the world. Once you got used to the feeling of being in control of the country, you would no longer consider giving up. Having been at the peak of power for thousands of years, the taste of power had long been imprinted in the deepest part of Anastrian's soul. In order to retain power, he could rely on Arthas, who seemed stronger at the time, and the Lich King Nizul behind him. When he realized that he was not used to being a servant and being treated as a slave, the stubbornness in his soul immediately flared up. Thus, during the 3rd battle at the Dark Portal, he easily betrayed the Lich King. After joining the tribe, when his subordinates were killed again and again, and his strength was constantly reduced, he could not bear it anymore. Thus, in the Outland, he secretly found a way to contact Kil'jaeden from a captured demon. Even after relying on the Burning Legion, he was still very careful. The Legion was not invincible. The tragedy of the ancient war and the Archeron's bones had repeatedly proven this. In the deal with the Eredar twins, he repeatedly emphasized that only when Kil'jaeden completely descended to Azeroth would he raise the flag of rebellion in the tribe and respond to the Burning Legion. Before that, he would still be the most loyal servant of the great chief Sal. The Eredar twins laughed coldly. This laughter made Anastrian's hair stand on end. In his heart, this was the Legion's distrust of swaying people who wanted to gain benefits from both sides. Recently, the Legion has rarely been able to enter the core of the Alliance and the Horde to obtain the latest and most detailed information. If I stay in the tribe, it will be beneficial for Sir Kil'jaeden to descend. Aless laughed. Haha, let's put it that way for now. Salolas said with a smile, no matter what, your contribution will not be small. The Eredar twins disappeared. The ones who were here before were only their soul projections. Feeling lost, the Sun King slowly walked out of the secret chamber and looked up at the palace that once belonged to him. the beams painted bright red, the brilliant ceiling made of marble and inlaid with gold leaf, the magic stone chandelier connected to the well of the sun that was always lit. The images went from blurry to clear until every detail was reflected in the eyes constructed by the fire of the soul. It's mine. It's all mine. It belongs to me. I want them all back. The Sun King opened his arms and let out a roar that shook half of the palace. The mages loyal to him knelt on the ground and chanted the holy name of the Sunstrider. Soon the Sun King came to a secret room that only he knew. As soon as he stepped into the room filled with cobwebs, the dusty floor lit up with mysterious magic runes. All of the runes formed a huge circular magic array that emitted a blazing red light. The light flickered as if it was welcoming the arrival of the true master of the Sunwell. Begin. The Sun King seemed to be talking to someone, but he also seemed to be talking to himself. After saying that, he began to chant an incantation. This was a secret valve that controlled the water in the Sunwell. Even Kale, that's didn't know about this place, let alone the current queen of Sindorii, Sylvanas. He looked in the direction of Silver Moon City with extreme disgust. Even though he was looking at a pitch-black wall, he felt that his gaze had transcended space and landed on the usurper, nailing her to the throne that should have belonged to him. He. Accompanied by the Sun King's cold laughter and the powerful energy of the Sunwell, more spatial holes appeared on the already slightly broken planet Azeroth's protective circle. These holes could not allow a Lord-level demon to pass through, but it was enough for the Eridar warlocks to complete their descent. Green teleportation doors opened in the palace corridors and halls of the Sunwell. Facing the Eridar demons that walked out of the teleportation doors, the High Elves were like their High Elves from 10,000 years ago. They knelt before these ugly and evil creatures that prided themselves on their nobility. Ha. The Eridar warlocks began to cast spells, injecting evil energy into the bodies of these self-indulgent High Elves, rotting their souls and bodies. Every High Elf's body changed. A pair of black goat's horns grew out of their foreheads. Sharp vampire-like canine teeth grew out. Their originally fair skin turned the color of wheat, and there were many evil runes on their skin. A pair of short black wings grew out of their shoulder blades, making them look a little out of place. There was also the green evil light that flowed from their wrists and ankles. They had turned from pure elves into a demon subspecies, Shadow Blade Elves. But they did not regret it because they felt an unprecedented surge of magic flowing in their bodies. For a moment, fanatical laughter and praises came from every palace in the Sunwell Highlands. Alright, I should go. I'll leave the rest to you. After the Sun King arranged everything, he turned around and opened a teleportation door to leave. Unfortunately, those who saw him off were not only his subordinates but also Duque. In Karazhan, Duque hugged Sylvanas affectionately. Beside him lay Aurelia and Sasha. When they saw this scene, their bodies trembled in anger. Anastrian, you bastard. It's not enough to betray all of Quel'Dorii. You want to betray Sindorii as well? If not for Duque holding her, Queen Sylvanas would have probably jumped up on the spot and killed her way to the Sunwell, stopping the escaping Sun King and beating him up first. Duque smiled, and there was a hint of nonchalance in his smile. The reason why conspiracies are scary is that before they start, everything is unknown. If it's a known conspiracy, then it's just a clown dancing in our palm. We can crush it easily. Aurelia was convinced. No wonder you've been sneaking into the Sunwell Highlands in all sorts of ways besides staying in Karazhan. So this is what you're up to. Sasha rubbed her eyebrows. You're amazing. There's even a live broadcast. Queen Sylvanas suddenly rejoiced. If not for Duque's precautions, once Kil'jaeden successfully descended, New Silvermoon would be the first to suffer. This brand new city built on the edge of the ruins of the old city had been restored to its former glory after 9 years with the full support of the Alliance, making it the new pride of Sindorii. The Windrunner sisters did not want this new city to be destroyed. That would hurt the morale of the citizens. Chapter 1506. Queen Sylvanas kissed Duque, then said in a serious tone, "We're waiting for Kil'jaeden to descend halfway, then we'll stop him. After dealing with Kil'jaeden, we'll go and kill Anastrian as well? He's already defected to the Burning Legion, so Thrall has no reason to protect him this time, right?" Duque smiled and shook his head. "We're not going to deal with Anastrian this time. The Forsaken mages are still useful to the Horde. Even if Thrall agrees to expel the Forsaken from the Horde, There's no point in him secretly protecting the bones. After all, we can't use the holy light to search every corner of Kalimdor. Sylvanas was indeed the Queen of Darkness who was very good at conspiracies. She immediately understood the crux of the matter. For example, even if Illidan committed all sorts of evil outside, as long as he did not directly harm his own country or people, there would be no absolute hatred and conflict of interest between the two sides. You want to keep Anastrian alive and let him find a chance to bite the Horde? Yes. It'll be difficult. There are a few dreadlords in the Forsaken faction who betrayed the Burning Legion. If things go wrong and Anastrian pushes the blame to his subordinates, then there's no way he'll be able to get rid of him. As long as he's still useful to the Horde, Thrall won't easily touch him. A confident smile appeared on Duke's face. Don't worry, I have absolute evidence. A moment ago, a soul contract had been placed on the desk next to Duke's. The Sun King would never have dreamed that the Eridar Gemini were actually Duke's people. There was no such thing as a soul contract in triplicate. Jaden only cared about receiving a soul contract and controlling the Sun King's soul fragment. He didn't care about anything else. As long as he could control Anastrian, that was enough for him. He would never have thought that the Eridar twins, who were trembling in fear and looked like they were about to piss their pants, had already planned to betray him. They had even purposely left an extra soul contract so that Duke could sell the Sun King for a good price in the future. If Jaden knew that the Eridar Gemini, who had been reduced to running errands and serving as cannon fodder, had long since sided with Duke, it was hard to imagine what kind of expression he would have. The three Windrunner sisters didn't know what Duke had mastered, but they had been Duke's women for a long time. As long as Duke said that he had a certain someone, then it was a sure thing. Duke didn't say anything, so they didn't ask. They just waited for the show to happen. Alright, now it's your turn. Duke gave Queen Sylvie a gentle hug. I know. Queen Sylvie's eyes gradually became sharp. When it came to the fate and future of her compatriots, she transformed into a decisive Queen of Darkness. A moment later, all the Alliance leaders received an urgent encrypted message from Queen Sylvanas in Silvery Moon City. It's an emergency. As Commander Marcus predicted, the Burning Legion has set their sights on the Sun Well. A quarter of an hour ago, a large number of Eridar warlocks infiltrated the Sun Well highlands and instigated the Sin Dorii mages, who thirsted for power to rebel. Now they have all become half-elf, half-demon monsters. What appeared in the magic projection was the newly born Shadow Blade Elves. Hiss. All the leaders gasped. Magni let out a long sigh. Duke, your prediction was indeed correct. No wonder you started making arrangements half a year ago. The Burning Legion making use of the Sun Well to cause trouble wasn't some monstrous prophecy. Could be said that this was something that all wise commanders could predict. The only difference was when and how large the scale. There were only two ways for the Burning Legion to invade Azeroth on a large scale. One was to forcefully kill the greatly strengthened Pentashade dragons in the Void battlefield against the powerful planet's anti-Titan magic formation. The other was to find a way to borrow the powerful energy of Azeroth to forcefully tear apart the protective magic formation and allow the commander-level demons to descend. The Burning Legion had spent more than 10,000 years proving that the first method wouldn't work. As long as 3 or more of the Pentashade dragons were still alive, they couldn't even think about it. The second method was to use the Well of Eternity during the Ancient War 10,000 years ago. Back then, the Well of Eternity was so powerful that it almost transported Sargeras in his complete form over. In the 15 years at the Dark Portal, the Dalajan who had gathered a large amount of magic had played this role. Unfortunately, the Dalajan didn't have a large source of magic. After using up the magic that had been accumulated for thousands of years, the Dalajan didn't have enough magic for Jaden to descend. Therefore, there were only 2 choices left. Either the Dark Portal or the new Well of the Sun. Compared to the Dark Portal, which was heavily guarded by the Alliance, the Well of the Sun, which had been put on hold and banned due to the loss of power in the magic faction, was easier to deal with. Unfortunately, Jaden's seemingly perfect plot was destined to be futile. Duke winked at the leaders. Alright, leaders who agree to carry out the Normandy invasion, please raise your hand. The result was, of course, unanimous. Imriel looked at Duke with misty eyes. She didn't know what the Normandy invasion was. She only knew that after Sargeras and Archimonde, the last leader of the Burning Legion was about to be toyed to death by Duke. She really couldn't describe how she felt. would kill Jaden, who had hunted down the Draenei for 25,000 years, who was known for his cunning and treacherous ways, who made all intelligent beings in the universe tremble and cry in fear, really fall for a trap so easily? If it was someone else, she would definitely scoff at it. However, when she personally climbed the highest peak of Mount Shang'er under Tyron's lead and admired Archimonde's huge remains, only bones were left. When she saw the small wound on his spine, she felt an unprecedented admiration for Duque. It was admiration for the person who saved her people, and also the hero who killed the Draenei's enemy. Even if her rationality kept telling her not to have too much hope for the demon commander, her budding heart always hoped for the success of Duque's operation this time. As Imriel waited anxiously, it had been almost a month since the birth of the Shadowblade elves. During this period, the mages who were spies reported that everything was fine in their daily reports. On the other hand, Sylvanas, the Azeroth Academy Award winner of the Best Actress Award, wanted nothing more than to hang these scumbags to death, but she still pretended to be in the dark. She even found an excuse to reduce the benefits of the mages. However, this actually made the mages faction feel more at ease. It was now the 5th of June. Suddenly, on this day, the entire Isle of Quell Donnas shook violently. Chapter 1507. Roar. A strange sound rang out on the Isle of Quell Donnas. The piercing howl quickly formed an intuitive concept in the mind of Sylvanas, who was in the palace of New Silvery Moon. If it was like the sharp sound of an arrow being shot, then the length of this arrow was probably the distance between Silvery Moon City and the middle of the Longsong Forest. The violent howl swept across the ruins of the old Silvery Moon City from west to east, and rushed towards New Silvery Moon City. Even though Sylvanas was mentally prepared, he still felt the back of his head go numb. He instinctively pulled Lilith forward, and the two of them rolled behind the sturdy desk. This was her desk, and it was also a piece of armor made by Duque with strong magic resistance. Almost as soon as the sonic boom rang out, the magic circle of this large armor was activated. Silvery Moon City's magic shield was activated along with it. The ignorant people looked at the sudden appearance of a bluish-purple magic shield in the sky above their city, and were at a loss of what to do. A second later, the terrifying sonic boom swept through the western wall of Silvery Moon City, and all the windows on the high walls. The magic shield could block direct attacks, even airwaves, but it could not stop the transmission of sound. The blood elves only heard a hum, and the sound seemed to be forced into their brains, causing their eardrums to swell. It was like the humming caused by the imbalance of internal and external air pressure. Even after a few seconds, everyone could still feel the continuous humming in their heads, and it took a long time for them to recover their hearing. The brand new city wall let out a wailing sound and dust fell in the rustling sound. Although the activation of the magic circle had avoided the direct hit of the sound wave, every window on all the towers above the city wall was creaking. This scene was like the end of the world. On the coast of New Silvery Moon City near the North Sea, a guard on a sentry tower immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Look, what's that?" He pointed to the west. On the Isle of Quell Donnas. It set off clouds of horrifying green mist. As the green fog that symbolized the dark powers dissipated, a monster that was at least 4 or 5 stories tall appeared from within the city wall of the Sunwell Heights. He twisted his head that seemed to have no neck and looked around slowly. It stood on the high ground, and the leaves around it had begun to wither. The layered canopy was like some kind of ornament on its waist, and this behemoth-like monster seemed to have grown out of the highlands of the Sunwell, like a hill on the highlands. This was simply too terrifying. Alarm. Ring the alarm. Let's see if the magical communication is still working. Contact Silvermoon City immediately and inform Her Majesty the Queen. You and you split into 3 groups and ride chocobos back to Silvermoon City to report. Coincidentally, one of the powerhouses of Silvermoon City, Haduran Brightwing, had just arrived while patrolling the city's defenses. At first, he did not understand why the Queen had secretly emphasized that he should stay in Silvery Moon City and not patrol Longsong Forest. Now he seemed to understand something. The Elven Rangers had always been pragmatic, and compared to the mage faction that emphasized elegance and composure, the Rangers were more capable. It took only 5 minutes from the discovery of a terrifying monster that looked like the Lord of the Abyss to the Queen's throne. Logically speaking, such a big thing would take at least a few hours to be reported to the Queen. Originally, Queen Sylvanas wanted to be the Queen of Shadows, But this was her kingdom, and she was surrounded by her compatriots and people. This time there was no need to act. Queen Sylvanas directly activated the highest level of magical communication in the Alliance. Emergency report. Traces of the Lord of the Abyss have been found on the Isle of Quel'Danas in the kingdom of Sindorii. Since that is where the Sunwell is, I highly suspect that the Burning Legion will use the Sunwell to invade Azeroth. Requesting emergency assistance from the Alliance. This magical communication to outsiders was like poking a hornet's nest. For a moment the Alliance was in an uproar and the Horde was shocked. Still in his pajamas, the drama queen Duque made the decision on the spot for the Alliance to enter the highest state of war. In less than 5 minutes, the highest level of red alert sounded in all the main cities and strongholds of the Alliance. Woo woo woo, the ear-piercing alarm echoed in the ears of 90% of the Alliance's soldiers and civilians. The next moment, all the magical communication mirrors set up in the main cities and large villages switched to Sally Whitemane, who had recently taken on a part-time job as a broadcaster. Whether it was the mirror or the magic broadcasting system, Sally's crisp and sonorous voice rang out. This is a red alert announcement. 20 minutes ago, a large-scale invasion of the Burning Legion was discovered on the Isle of Quel'Danas in the kingdom of Sindorii. Queen Sylvanas Windrunner has requested emergency assistance from the Alliance. Now, all Alliance soldiers immediately cancel their leave and report to the nearest command post. All militias immediately gather at the various military camps. After Duque came to power, he had always emphasized emergency response. Before the first year of the Dark Portal, according to this logistics system that was close to the European Middle Ages, it was already a miracle to be able to mobilize an army of 50,000 people in a month. Well, the Alliance could mobilize an army of 1 million in 5 days. In the East Valley lumberyard in the Elven Forest, hearing the alarm, an old man decisively cut the rope on his carriage. Logs immediately rolled to the side of the road. The reason he did this was because he saw a few disheveled Alliance soldiers carrying their equipment and running in the direction of the town. With one look he could tell that they were soldiers on leave. There's no time to explain, get on the carriage. The uncle patted the side of his carriage. Thank you, Uncle Doolittle. No need to thank me. You are also protecting our world. In the steam train stations of various sizes, after hearing the alarm, the workers immediately stopped loading the goods. They pushed boxes of goods that had nothing to do with military supplies off the carriage and threw them to the side of the railway. Hurry, hurry. Carriage 1 to 6, load all of them with wheat. Carriage 7 to 12 for the assembled soldiers. As soon as the station master finished speaking, a thin stream of silver flowed into his field of vision. It was the Alliance soldiers, some sitting in carriages, some running. Although they were a little disheveled, it did not hinder them from converging on the railway like rivers flowing into the sea. At this moment the Alliance, the war machine that had never completely stopped, was once again in full force. Woo woo woo, hearing the alarm from Stormwind City to the Iron Furnace Fort, to the South Sea City-State to New Lordaeron, to Kul Tiras, diesel tanks that had been well repaired lifted the canvas covering them. With ear-piercing roars they drove out of the warehouse built in the cave. The warships that had long been filled with ammunition and fuel whistled, calling the sailors who quickly ran to the ship. Chapter 1508. In the sky above the blasted land, Naxxramas, the floating fortress that the soldiers in the watchtower were used to and mocked as the second moon, rumbled. Usually, if soldiers wanted to go to Naxxramas, they would have to take the airship first and then transport it up one by one. Naxxramas looked like it couldn't wait any longer. It began to slowly land at the designated docking point that was specially opened for it. In order to prevent possible enemy invasion and infiltration, Naxxramas basically stayed in the air. Now that it had taken the initiative to come down and take over the soldiers on rotation, everyone knew how urgent the situation was. In the command post of the watchtower, Boulang Bronzebeard patted Reginald Windsor's shoulder and looked at the powerhouses beside him. I'll leave this place to you. Don't worry. Reginald smiled. No one can pass through here. Gavin Radd smiled. Kale, if that's who was standing next to him, also smiled. In history, the Overwatch fortress was guarded by Archmage Sastranan and General Lodinson, 2 unknown fellows. Now they were not even ranked in the watchtower. Because the Alliance had completely withdrawn from the Outlands, Danath Trollbane had been sent back by Duque to restore his country. There was no longer a need to go to the Outlands. The watchtower had returned to its function as a gateway to Azeroth, so strengthening its defense was necessary. The latest change was that Reginald was appointed as the commander-in-chief of the watchtower. Under him was the commander-in-chief of the infantry, Gavin Rad, the commander-in-chief of the cavalry, Haas, the commander-in-chief of the mages, Kale, Thats, and the commander-in-chief of the artillery, Bu Lang. As for Naxxramas, Tyrion was now in charge, Cudrin Wildhammer was in charge of the Air Force, and Solarian was in charge of the mages. Without the losses in history, the alliance could be said to be full of talents. If the missing Ronin and the others could return, that would be even better. Although Kale, Thats held the title of Speaker of Kirin Tor, the kind-hearted former prince seemed to have no interest in politics. After washing away the stigma of being a traitor, he preferred to be a dedicated character. Especially when it came to the issue of the Well of the Sun this time, he simply avoided arousing suspicion and did not even return to the Dalajan. Instead, he brought the group of 4 who jumped back to be loyal subjects to guard the borders of planet Azeroth. Although Naxxramas had the teleportation function, in order to avoid any accidents and not to alert the enemy at the beginning, it had not been moved. If he rushed there at full speed, he could reach Silvermoon City within a week. Of course, before that, the Alliance's fleet would arrive first. The port of Kul Tiras was in an uproar. Aegwynn, dressed as a high elf, tossed the report aside and chuckled, "My queen, who are you trying to fool? You guys are really secretive this time, but I've already arranged everything." Gianna was silent at first. The Alliance didn't have a drill earlier or later. It just so happens that in June they're going to drill for a beach landing and artillery cover? Or a live-fire exercise on the northern coast of Rotterdam. Don't tease me. Starting from May, all the bombs that were shipped to the ship were high-explosive bombs. Also, do you really think I can't receive reports from Vasht's Naga troops? Jaina could only smile bitterly. Can you tell? Nonsense. Of course, I also know that the throne must have asked for confidentiality, so I won't say anything. Aegwynn was a little unhappy, but she quickly relaxed. It's good too. With such an excellent heir, us guardians of the previous generation can also be more comfortable. Hehe. My son has good foresight and has chosen an excellent successor. Now he can enjoy his retirement in peace. Gianna sighed. For so many years, Medivh had been living in self-blame. He always thought that if he had discovered Sargeras's soul in his body earlier, or if his will had been stronger, he might have been able to suppress Sargeras and avoid opening the dark portal, causing a series of disasters now. He did not think that Sargeras had been causing trouble since he was still in his mother's womb. Would he really let him grow into a strong-willed man like Uther? But let bygones be bygones. Clearly, her man Duque had done a better job than Medivh and Aegwynn in becoming a guardian. At that moment, Duque had already taken Tyrion and Tyrande to Silvery Moon through the portal. With Etish, a godly item with spatial properties, Duke wasn't afraid of being intercepted when he teleported in Azeroth. Sylvanas breathed a sigh of relief when she saw Duque's arrival. After Duque went out for a walk and reassured the Sindorii, Queen Sylvanas nervously informed him of the latest situation. Jaden has not arrived yet, but the situation at the Sunwell Highlands is not looking good. In addition to the Lord of the Abyss, we also found a blue dragon. With that, Queen Sylvanas sent the occasional surveillance images to the magic mirror. Duque slapped his forehead. How could I have forgotten about this guy? It was a beautiful adult blue dragon. His huge body faintly showed incomparably beautiful lines in the misty dark energy weapon that intersected light and darkness. It was a tension filled with a sense of power. The scales, which were as detailed as a work of art, were a beautiful sky blue. However, there were some places such as the crown that were faintly green. Of course, Duque recognized him. Wasn't he Calegos, who later became the Blue Dragon King in history? Guys with a little green on their heads often did not have a good ending, such as Illidan, who had pretended to join the army. A prairie on his head, that was a symbol of dark energy corruption. Oh no, oh no. Sickness must be treated, don't King drag it out. Ahem, that was generally true, but Calegos, Duque did not know what to say about him. Before transmigrating, the official introduction that Duke saw said, Calegos is a member of the Blue Dragon Legion. As one of the few dragon eggs that survived the destruction of the Wings of Death, he is a new generation of dragons born. He is powerful and wise, and he can quickly take charge. Sounds awesome, right? But look at his original record in history. He was shot down from the sky in Kuel Salis by the dwarves with muskets. He was controlled by a demon in the Sunwell. He was chased by the black dragons in the Cataclysm and went to seek refuge with the goblins as Hara. In the end, he found the old blue dragon Azuragos who liked the soul healer and destroyed the group of black dragons. He was beaten up by the Twilight Dragon, and the orange staff girl who supported him died. He was shot down by the Horde's airship during the Battle of the Amor. Deathwing instantly destroyed the Horde's airship. It was no wonder that Duque had completely forgotten about this guy. Calegos was so weak that he could scratch his feet. He was a disgrace to the dragons. Chapter 1509. If Duke remembered correctly, this guy should have come to quell Velos after the Well of the Sun was blown up by Arthas. Even if Duke rebuilt the Well of the Sun, Maligos, who was worried about the spread of the energy of the Well of the Sun, still decided to send Calegos to quell Velos. The mission given to him by the Blue Dragon King was to investigate the remaining energy of the Well of the Sun that had been destroyed by the Scourge not long ago. This was not unprecedented. After all, Illidan had used a bottle of water from the Well of Eternity to create a new Well of Eternity. Kale, that's grandfather, had used a bottle of water from the Well of Eternity to create the Well of the Sun. Who knew if there would be a second or third Well of the Sun? If history had not changed, then Calegos had transformed into a blue-haired human youth, Carrie, and searched everywhere in Kuel Salis and Lordaeron. By chance he found a strange human girl named Anvina who lived with her parents, and they had a good impression of each other. Dragon Mage Krasis jumped out to explain that he had created an illusion to prevent the Scourge from obtaining the energy of the Well of the Sun. That illusion was Anvina. As a high-level red dragon, Anvina, although she was the carrier of the energy of the Well of the Sun, was also flesh and blood and had feelings. Soon she fell in love with Calegos. Calegos swore to protect Anvina's safety. At this point, the development of things should be similar to history. As for what happened next, suddenly Khadgar's magic message arrived. It was also something that seemed to come from a floating bottle, but it described something that did not match the known history of Duque. A certain traitor, without asking, it was the Sun King who had betrayed his country and Azeroth, secretly guided a group of demons, the Eridar Gemini, to find the incarnation of the Well of the Sun, Anvina. While Calegos was not around, he used a group of lackeys to capture Anvina, and began an evil ritual on the highlands of the Well of the Sun. The purpose was to summon the commander of the Burning Legion, Kil'jaeden. And the brave Calegos bravely charged into the Well of the Sun, but it seemed that he was captured instead of saving her. After reading this, Duque rubbed his eyebrows, and could not help but sigh at the terrible inertia of history. All right, I'll report this to the Dragon Slumber Shrine. Duke turned his head and waved his hand. A magic mirror appeared out of thin air, and the red dragon symbol on the oval mirror disappeared after only 2 seconds, as if ripples had appeared on the surface of the mirror. The mirror image showed a red-haired mature woman with her arms akimbo in an S pose. Yo, Duque, is it about the thing you mentioned before? Yes, but we have a small interlude here. It seems that Calegos of the Sleeping Dragon Temple has been captured by the demons. According to our intelligence, it's very likely that he's been enslaved by some kind of will. Before Duque could finish, an angry voice came from beside Alexstrasza. That idiot! What a disgrace to the dragon race. Then the voice cursed for a while. It was obvious that it was the blue dragon's boss, Maligos. The red dragon queen had to cast a spell to shield herself before the communication became quiet. Hey, I saw your formation from above. Aren't you afraid of scaring Kil'jaeden away? Or what if Kil'jaeden really did descend upon them? It would be good to intercept him, but it would be bad if you play with fire. Once he successfully descends, he will definitely bring his army to the void battlefield. I don't have the time to help you besiege Kil'jaeden. Duque smiled. His smile showed the strongest confidence. As soon as he opened his mouth, his words were like iron. When you were captured, I saved you. If you want to deal with Nesario, I helped you deal with it. Even if he's as strong as Thun, I still helped you create a time difference on the battlefield, and even Thun was destroyed. When have I ever disappointed you? The red dragon queen rolled her eyes. She had an expression that said, "You're so powerful and I'm speechless." Right. You're also a demigod who went through life and death with Azeroth. I won't ask about your backup plan. I agree this time. Oh, Maligos wants you to kill that useless son of AB*T as well. So as not to embarrass him. Duke shrugged his shoulders. For the time being, this could be considered as getting an imperial sword. Is there anything else? The red-haired queen in the mirror asked. Let me have a word with her. The image quickly changed and a beautiful black-haired queen appeared. Yo, my mount, how are you doing in the void battlefield? Xianxia spat out 3 words. Very boring. Work hard in the void battlefield this time. I'll bring you flying, when you come back. Duque said with a double meaning. The Black Dragon Princess blushed instantly and then nodded quietly. The communication ended. In the fortress of the void battlefield, Alexstrasza glanced at the descendant of the Black Dragon who had just finished communicating with Duque and sighed in her heart. Xianxia is good in every aspect, but she lacks the sense of responsibility to protect the world. She's always not motivated, so she tends to save her life and retreat in battle. She didn't expect Duque's words to increase her fighting spirit. How magical! In Silvermoon City, Rothma Theron entered the hall where Queen Sylvanas was and bowed. Your Majesty, the Alliance's fleet that is acting on the northern coast has received your request for help. They have now arrived at the border and they request to enter and fight together. Granted. After sending Rothma away, Sylvanas seemed a little worried. Are we reacting too quickly? I'm afraid of scaring Jaden. If we only kill a Lord of the Abyss with such a big formation. Duque raised his right index finger and shook it proudly. No. You underestimate Jaden, and the Burning Legion's desire for something on planet Azeroth. As the only 2 ways to enter this planet, if we don't take any precautions and act like a trap, then we'll really scare Jaden away. If we react too strongly, it'll actually speed up Jaden's entry. Queen Sylvanas' expression became strange. Fortunately, she didn't say, you people who play with tactics are all dirty. Otherwise, Duque really didn't know what expression to use to face the Queen of Darkness, who was originally on the verge of entering the evil path in history. Duque continued, the combat power of mortals can at most deal with ordinary demons. The real deciding factor is the combat power of hero level or above, as well as timing. Queen Sylvanas didn't know how many times she had heard this word. Jaden's main body was too powerful and huge. Ordinary portals couldn't withstand such a powerful demon passing through at all. For example, in the Ancient War, Sargeras wanted to enter, but even if he used up all the energy of the entire Well of Eternity, it still took him a long time. In addition, he used all his strength outside to barely make an opening. Chapter 15:10. Queen Sylvanas still remembered Duque's explanation during the secret throne meeting. Jaden is the most cunning of the Burning Legion's 3 powerhouses. With the incident with Archimonde, it's unlikely that he will invest all of his soul in this descent. There's a high chance that he will find a way to let his body pass through and invest no more than half of his soul. Only then will he be able to bear the consequences of failure. In less than 10 years he will be able to completely resurrect in the Twisting Nether. How much Jaden's body passes through the teleportation gate is a very delicate task. If it's too much, his power will be too great and it may cause uncontrollable consequences. If it's too little, it won't matter to him. The lost limbs will recover in a few months. I've studied it with Goddess Elune for a long time, and we think that a ratio of 40% to 60% is the most appropriate. At that time, William and Magni had asked how Duque was going to ensure that the timing was right. Duque raised 3 fingers. Firstly, I rebuilt the Well of the Sun. In order to prevent the Sun King Anastrian from retaliating, I secretly changed some things. When Duque said the first point, Queen Sylvanas still glared at Duque. Although she and Duque had already kissed each other, it was unheard of for Duque to cause trouble so early on. Secondly, I've already set up the magic net. Goddess Elune will also act at the same time as me. Of course, under such circumstances the Isle of Quel'Danas will probably be lost. But we can guarantee that the damage won't spread to the Sin Dorii kingdom. Hearing this, the leaders were actually relieved. Thirdly, I can reveal part of the mystery to everyone this time. Why I've always had such accurate information about the Burning Legion. This time, everyone's curiosity was piqued. All along, the information that Duque provided about the Burning Legion had always been 100% accurate. Even if it wasn't comprehensive, at least the part that he provided was absolutely correct. This could no longer be described as investigation or spying. Sure enough, Duque confirmed their guesses. When I returned to the ancient war, I accidentally buried a chess piece. I didn't expect that even after 15 years in the Door of Darkness, when I didn't know that I would return to the past in the future, my chess piece had already faithfully fulfilled its duty and provided me with information. Of course, now that things had come to this, my chess piece's situation in the army was a little dangerous. If we can successfully ambush Kil'jaeden this time, I will retrieve this chess piece in front of everyone. When Duque admitted this in front of everyone, the leaders almost fainted. This was way too awesome. He had relied on the Bronze Dragon King to return to the past, infiltrate the army and wreak havoc on Sargeras. Even his lair had been blown up. He actually had the time to set up a spy. Based on the intelligence he had previously come into contact with, this hidden chess piece's level was quite high. Otherwise, in the Battle of Mount Hyjal, it would have been impossible to know how many leaders Archimonde had, and what skills and specialties they had. At that moment, who knew how many alliance leaders gave Duque a thumbs up in admiration. "Hey, you're awesome. You're so awesome." After thinking about it, Queen Sylvanas sighed softly. On the other side, Tyrion Fordring had already led the Silverhand Knights through the portal and joined the kingdom's elite troops led by Hageron. They were near the coastline, watching the demons and enchanted elves of the Isle of Quel'Danas from across the water. When only Duque, Queen Sylvanas and Tyrande were left in the hall, Tyrande suddenly said softly, "Duque, I'm thinking that your spy in the Burning Legion isn't the Eredar Gemini, is it?" This sentence hit the bullseye. Duque's face fell not because he had been hit, but because of Tyrande's, as expected, expression. Her slightly resentful eyes were clearly saying, "You pervert, it's not enough that you harmed me in the ancient war, now you want to add Vashj as well. So there's the Eredar Gemini." It wasn't just Tyrande, even Sylvanas looked as if she understood everything. Duque panicked and immediately tried to explain, "Hey. Wait, it's true that I forced the Eredar Gemini to surrender, but the process isn't what you think. There's really nothing going on between me and those two demonesses." Who knew that Tyrande and Sylvanas had already started to use their ultimate moves. Tyrande held her own face with a little resentment. "Sigh, as your woman, I've never asked you about your personal matters. I only hope that you have some control." Queen Sylvanas also sighed. "I used to think that it was a good thing that you had no racial bias and could completely accept the elves. Only now do I realize that your hobbies are getting wider and wider. First it was the dragon. Then it was the Naga. Don't think that we didn't notice that you've been staring at Imreals but recently." "Say that's true. Else can't have that kind of butt." Queen Sylvanas twisted her body and stuck out her butt, but immediately gave up. This time Duque was like mud falling on his pants. Even if it wasn't sh*t, it was still sh*t. His two women were singing the same tune. This was practically the same as the women from before Duque's transmigration. To explain was to cover up, and to cover up was useless. The more he tried to explain, the worse it would get. Even if Duque really had a bold idea before, he hadn't put it into action yet. Duque's heart took 100,000 points of damage, and he suddenly felt like he had nothing left to live for. Duque raised his head 45 degrees to the sky as if there were tears in his eyes. "Anyway, I've never touched the Eredar Gemini. Believe it or not, it's up to you." With that, Duque left without looking back. Tyrande and Queen Sylvanas looked at each other. Could it be that we've really misunderstood Duque? Then, should we apologize to him? Let's finish this war first." "All right." Outside the city, while the Horde was still hesitating on whether or not to start the war again, the war machine that was the Alliance was already in full swing. Boom, boom, boom. Magical puppets that were almost 2 stories tall were brought out from New Silveryman's warehouse. They formed a huge line from the west gate all the way to the shore near the Isle of Quel'Danas. On the shore, even Hageron himself was surprised, because he saw that not far from the beach, there were many hemispherical magical cannons rising from the ground. All of the cannons were aimed at the Isle of Quel'Danas. Obviously, these things did not belong to the old Silvery Moon City. If they did, they would have been able to use them when Arthas came to Silvery Moon City to cause trouble. These expensive magic cannons were obviously Dalaran's handiwork just by looking at their appearance. When did they get here? Hageron knew about this, but he didn't know that it was of such a scale and quantity. Chapter 1511. Firearms were very costly. Ever since the destruction of the old Silvery Moon City, in order to rebuild the new Silvery Moon City, the treasury was like a rat race. The most abominable thing was that after the Sun King Anastrian committed treason, he had his henchmen steal the treasury. This was not done on the day of the treason, but after he followed the Lich King, the elves who were loyal to him kept stealing, and most of them were mages in charge of magic formations. This was also why Sylvanas did not want to please the mage faction. After being in power for thousands of years, no one could get used to suddenly changing to a lowly person. And the 4 Windrunner sisters were from the Ranger family, so the 2 factions were destined to be unable to truly cooperate. So basically, when they caught those mages, they could leave the things behind and go. Normally, when a country was destroyed, the treasury was emptied, and the collapse of the country was inevitable. But the 3 Windrunner sisters were Duque's women. Since the Dark Portal's 2nd year, the Marcus family had been collecting copyright fees, and almost all new inventions had a share of Duque. For example, the railways throughout the Eastern Kingdom's mainland were all funded by the Marcus family. Building the railways was free, and the manpower, materials, and even maintenance fees were all paid by the Marcus family. Anyone who used the railways had to pay, right? Every carriage, every pound of goods had to pay a fare. It seemed cheap, but with the extremely exaggerated transportation volume, it was an astronomical figure. This move was learned from the Celestial Empire before Duque's transmigration. The Belt and Road Initiative was provided by him, building the railways, invigorating the economy, driving the logistics, and improving the local people's living standards. At the same time, his family's market was also monopolized by him. Anyway, the flatbread was getting bigger and bigger. Even if he ate the biggest portion, at least he ate more than before. As the wealthiest family in the world, the wealth that they had accumulated was enough for Sindoriai to revive. Duque doted on his women, and that was how awesome he was. It was really not a joke to say that he was as rich as a country. If he ran out of money one day, the queen would make an emergency visit to Karazhan and unlock a new position. Because of this, Kuel Salas's remaining mages faction could not do much. Either they had been completely subdued by Queen Sylvie, or they had been sent to the Isle of Quel'Donas to serve as food. Since all the people with different political views were gathered on the island and they had willingly become the Burning Legion's minions, there was no need to be polite. General Brightwing, all 388 magic cannons are ready. Please give your orders. A blood elf saluted Hadron. The most important feature of the alliance was that the military system of each country would be unified into the alliance system. Even the military ranks would be completely changed to NCOs, lieutenants, majors, and generals. The ranks of general and below could be conferred by each country. However, the armies of each country had a unified numbering system, and all independent designations had to be reported to the alliance for approval before they could be implemented. Hadron sighed. The Isle of Quel'Donas has been occupied by the half-demon Shadowblade elves. There are no more of our kind there. So the queen ordered the cannons to be fired at the Isle of Quel'Donas. I understand. A few minutes later, there was a strange whooshing sound along the entire coastline. Looking over from New Silvermoon City, it was as if a dazzling rainbow had suddenly appeared on the shore, piercing through the sky and forming beautiful arcs. Finally, it fell into the former holy land of the elves, the Isle of Quel'Donas, where the Well of the Sun was located. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Violent explosions sounded from every corner of the island. The elves in charge of watching and monitoring the results of the battle had tears streaming down their faces at some point. Their tears flowed and flowed again and again. After splitting from the night elves who rejected the use and research of magic, the high elves had lived a life that respected magic for a full 8,000 years. They had long been used to the existence of magic, to the island that was regarded as a holy land by everyone, and to the sunwell that always produced a huge amount of magic energy. But now they were going to destroy it. On the surveillance screen, the exquisite pavilions were reduced to brightly colored debris that no longer had any artistic value. The forest path with the singing of birds and the fragrance of flowers had turned into huge craters. This was a farewell to the history of their race. In the frontline command post close to the sea, Queen Sylvanas and Lilith were silent when they saw the weeping elves on the screen. Duque said, "Now you understand why I insisted that Sindoriai fire the first shot, right? If the Alliance's fleet fired first, Sindoriai would always inexplicably vent his anger on them. The hellfire is coming. Lorthemar warned. On the screen, countless stone giants that were burning with green flames and as tall as a full 3-story building rushed out of the island with huge and fast steps. These war machines that had no intelligence and only had the ability to carry out simple tactics had once beaten the Alliance to a pulp. However, the era of conquering the world with one move had long passed. Let the magic puppets go up. Queen Sylvanas waved her hand. Countless magic puppets that glowed with a unique purple-blue arcane light walked out of the passageway with heavy steps, past the battle formation of the Blood Elves, and lined up neatly on the shore. The Hellfire strode into the water, which was not very deep. Although there was seawater between the Isle of Quel'Danas and the Kingdom of Sindorii, it was actually a relatively shallow harbor. The deepest part was only about 20 meters. The burning Hellfire rushed into the water. Of course, the demonic flames on their bodies would not be extinguished by the seawater so easily. Instead, they crazily evaporated the seawater. Plop, plop. On the surface of the water, the position of each Hellfire could be clearly seen. Because of the high temperature, a large number of bubbles appeared in the water. A few minutes later, the Hellfire had already engaged the magic puppets of the elves on the shore. It was a very primitive battle without any sense of beauty to speak of. If you hit me, I'll hit you back. Generally speaking, the puppets were more quickly dismantled into parts, while the Hellfire were more resistant to beatings. Holy light formation fire. Hadgeron ordered expressionlessly. Half a minute later, a deafening roar came from the elves' rear formation. Large-caliber mortars were firing at them. Mortar shells filled with Stratholme's holy water began to pour down on the beach. Coupled with the water spray trucks that were temporarily modified from fire trucks, they sprayed golden water pillars dozens of meters away. For a moment, the entire shore was shining with golden light. It was a beautiful sight. In the command center, Duque secretly yawned. He really could not get excited about this kind of battle that was like chickens pecking at each other. Has our fleet arrived? Duque asked Jaina in the magic mirror. Yes. Chapter 15:12. Countless huge and long shadows swept across the surface of the blue sea. It was as if the army of angels under the throne of God had sent wave after wave of arrows raining down from the sky. The clouds were wantonly swept away, and the birds that were originally soaring in the sky screamed and fled in all directions. A griffin was flying at a low altitude, followed by a second and a third. The huge flock of griffins flew in small groups. Even though they had deliberately kept their distance, there were just too many of them. They looked like a swarm of locusts covering the sky and covering the sun. Locusts also had two colors. The white and yellow ones were the griffins. The purple-black ones were the hippogriffs. Ever since the Alliance became rich in resources, there was now a large amount of coarse fodder to feed cattle and other livestock. Every time the livestock were fattened up, they would be placed in the hunting grounds for the griffins or the hippogriffs to hunt. After more than 20 years, the Alliance had more than 10,000 griffins, and the number of hippogriffs had also exceeded 4,000. This time they brought along 5,000 griffins and 2,000 hippogriffs. It was not these birds that were flying in the sky. It was a huge fleet that could not be counted by the human eye. On the skybreaker, the strong wind blew her long blonde hair, and the strands of hair swept across her face. Jaina lifted her chin and turned her body in a playful manner, looking at the scene from a 360-degree angle. From her vision to the horizon and the horizon, the vast space of hundreds of square kilometers seemed to have formed a flat arc. On the island at the far east of this arc, the green aura of dark energy shot up into the sky. And on the land at the farthest end, the golden aura continued to flourish. Other than that, everything within sight was built by the people of the Alliance. It could be said to be the crystallization of the perfect combination of intelligence and military power, and it gave off a glow that filled one with a sense of pride. On the mainland of the Kingdom of Sindorii, because the Isle of Quel'Danas was located northwest of the mainland, they could also see the huge fleet of steel ships stretching from the sky to the sea in the west. Because of the horizon, it looked like a magic trick as battleships after battleships grew out of thin air from that line. The flying battleship seemed to be parked in midair, but in an instant, it grew larger and larger until it occupied more than half the sky. On the surface of the sea, there were even more densely packed black dots. At first they were black dots, but when they unfurled the magical power furnaces on the warships, the runes on the defensive spell formation shone, making the warships that had long abandoned their sails seem to have returned to the olden days when they relied on sailboats to cross the sea. Duque led the alliance into the industrial era, which was also an era of steel. When magic and technology were perfectly combined, there was a huge fleet of more than 3,000 ships. What was even more terrifying was that this fleet was not the main force of the alliance. The main fleet of the alliance was still on the sea opposite Kurtiras, waiting for the arrival of the main fleet of Stormwind. After all, they could not bring the main fleet to the sea opposite Rotterdam. Otherwise it would be too fake. The main fleet was also the reason why this B squadron dared to launch an all-out attack. If the griffins and flying battleships were like locusts just now, then when the Black Fleet appeared on the sea for a moment, the elves thought that they were seeing a school of sardines. The ships that appeared like stars because of the magic shield appeared in the vision of all the elves. The Blood Elves suddenly felt a sense of rejoice that although they were forced to abandon the olden era where magic was respected, they were fortunate to have caught the last train of the new era. The new battleships of the Alliance had long since refreshed the traditional concept of the tonnage of battleships. Once upon a time at the end of the first Battle of the Dark Portal, Aurelia arrived at South Shore with the Elven fleet, using a small frigate that was still dozens of tons. The frigates all started at 1,000 tons. The destroyers started at 5,000 tons. The cruisers had more than 10,000 tons. The battleships had more than 50,000 tons. Of course, Duque did not intend to build such a big one. However, the dwarves' craftsmanship could not reach modern standards in terms of steel quality. In order to maintain the strength of the various indicators of the battleships, everything was built thick and hard. Anyway, there was a large supply of iron ore from the tribe and the dwarves could afford it. Then it became like this. Duque had long planned that one day he would dismantle all those old battleships and put them back into the furnace to be remade. The first to enter the elves' field of vision were the lightest frigates. Almost as soon as they arrived, they formed a densely packed defensive formation to prevent attacks from any direction. As cannons, the frigates were not equipped with strong equipment. However, they were loaded with a lot of depth charges. It could not be helped. If it was just the Burning Legion, it would be easy to deal with them. The demons in the Legion did not like to play with water. The problem was that they still had to guard against the ancient god Enzoth, who was known to have 1,000 tentacles. Historically, Enzoth was still doing nothing at this point in time. However, after so many problems, Duque no longer had much hope in the goddess of destiny's integrity. It was better to always have the initiative in his own hands. First, the fastest frigates dispersed, then the destroyers and finally the cruisers, which were mainly anti-air, protected the slower battleships as they entered the sea. It was like this on the sea and it was the same in the sky. The small and medium-sized ships, with the larger battleships as the center, formed a three-dimensional formation. Hiss, the elves gasped. With Sindorii opening fire first, the Alliance fleet no longer had any reservations. Fire! Jaina ordered. The huge cannons on the battleships with a diameter of over 400 millimeters first let out a shocking roar. On the Isle of Quel'Danas, a Shadow Blade elf asked the frontline commander Eridar Gemini. The Alliance's cannons have opened fire. We should put up a magic protection formation. Elises frowned. Most of the energy in the Sunwell has been diverted to the summoning ritual. Queen Sayla Ras nodded. The important summoning ritual cannot be interrupted. Otherwise, Lord Kill Jaden will skin us alive. Then let's defend the key areas. Abandon the rest of the Isle of Quel'Danas. Even though his body had become half demon, the Shadow Blade elf's face still twitched. However, his soul no longer belonged to him. The order from the demon boss must be carried out to the letter. On the entire island, only the Sunwell Highlands had a magic shield. A few seconds later the earth shook. The Eridar Gemini's faces were filled with shock. None of the cannonballs hit the Sunwell Highlands, but they heard a rustling sound coming from the top of the hall, as if something was breaking. They looked up and heard a loud bang. A huge crack suddenly appeared on the golden ceiling, and then the left and right walls were instantly asymmetrical. The ground on one side began to rumble and sink. God, the Alliance's cannons actually cracked this place. Chapter 15:13. Lord Brutalis. What do we do? The Eridar twins handed the ball to the Lord of the Abyss. A fallen phoenix was no better than a chicken. The twins who were once Jaden's trusted subordinates were now just ordinary demons that Jaden hadn't abandoned yet. In fact, the fact that the noble Eridar twins who were good at working behind enemy lines and plotting was reduced to a fighter at the front line was enough to prove that Jaden didn't like the twins. Therefore, after the medium-sized teleportation gate was opened, the Lord of the Abyss, Brutalis, wasn't the twins in charge. This very powerful general of the Burning Legion, who had even attached a huge double-edged sword to one of his arms and a sawtooth scimitar to the other, was also a little worried. The Lords of the Abyss had always been trusted by the higher-ups of the army. They were given the position of vanguard and the authority of frontline commanders, not because they were very good at planning, but because they had a strong ability to execute orders. According to their original estimation, the weak Sindorii kingdom wouldn't be able to fight back at all. By the time they notified the alliance that something had happened here and slowly gathered their troops, it would be too late. Jaden had already completed his arrival. Now the situation was completely unexpected. The alliance's reaction was unexpectedly fast. It was unknown if it was a coincidence or intentional, but the alliance had directly pulled over the fleet that was doing a military exercise nearby. It had only been a few hours. No matter how one looked at it, there was a strong smell of conspiracy. Brutalis knew very well that Lord Jaden had given a death order. If they couldn't hold on until the largest teleportation gate was opened, even he probably wouldn't be able to bear the consequences. Look, the Eridar twins were so spoiled back then, but now they could only be cannon fodder at the front line. If they successfully arrived this time, they might have a chance to turn the tables. If they failed, Brutalis glanced at the twins and realized that they had actually pulled over most of their souls in their main bodies. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, these two bitches are really going all out. Pulling over their main bodies and putting in most of their souls would allow them to have more combat power after the arrival, but if they failed, the price would be even more tragic. Few demons were willing to put in more than half of their souls when it came to high-risk fieldwork like the Archerons. However, demons were demons. Of course, they wouldn't be so kind as to care about others' lives, especially when they were of different races. The Lord of the Abyss, who was jokingly called Fatty Boo by the players, pondered for a moment. The teleportation must continue. The resistance of those insignificant mortals was already within Lord Jaden's expectations, so there was no need to worry. I'll teleport a few more lords over. You'll be in charge of defense in the meantime. After saying that, Fatty Boo moved his fat dragon-shaped lower body and began to run to the sun well. The twins glanced at each other. Due to their long-standing tacit understanding, a single glance was all it took for them to communicate. Seeing that Fatty Cloth had left, Gemini immediately started to set the pace. The teleportation ritual must not be disturbed. Expand the range of the protective barrier. If you don't have enough magic power, use the Sunwell's reserves. Send out the Apocalypse Guards. Half of them will guard the sky above the Isle of Queldanas, the other half will attack the humans' floating fleet and finally attack the ones on the sea. From the sound of it, every order given by Gemini was very appropriate and steady. They clearly carried out the will of the Vanguard commander, and no one would be able to find fault with them. Although the demons below looked down on Gemini from the bottom of their hearts, Gemini's combat power was still at the level of a lord. Now that she was holding the Imperial sword, the demons could only obey. On the other side in the magic mirror, seeing the Burning Legion's actions, Duque couldn't help but laugh out loud. What's wrong? Queen Sylvanas didn't feel that there was anything wrong with dividing half of the Apocalypse Guards to attack and the other half to defend. Duque proudly shook his index finger. Half of the power to attack and the other half to defend. It seems very safe, but there's a premise. The opponent's strength is far inferior to yours. As long as the opponent's strength is similar to yours, then doing this is courting death. When Queen Shi heard this, she immediately understood. It was like a person punching with 50 kilograms of strength and 50 kilograms of defense. If the opponent punched with 100 kilograms of strength, how could you defend with only 50 kilograms of strength? Then as a whole, if the defense failed, you wouldn't even be able to attack. When Duque bragged that Gemini was his subordinate, Queen Sylvanas didn't dare to believe it completely, but now she was at least 80% convinced. Duque then gave Tyrande a look and Tyrande immediately understood. She opened a magic message and said something. In the sky, the Apocalypse Guards covered the sky and covered the earth as they charged over aggressively. There weren't many of them, only about 500 of them, but their strength was not proportional to each other. It was not that the Apocalypse Guards were bragging, but they could easily take on 10 Griffin Knights at once. Because it was an all-around suppression. Griffins and Hippogriffons may be flying beasts, but they did not have long-range attacks. The Apocalypse Guards could use all kinds of shadow and dark magic. The natural gap in range could not be made up by the Griffin Knights' storm warhammers or the Night Elves' bows. Moreover, the dark powers had miraculous effects on almost any type of armor. The only thing that could fight against dark energy was the holy light. In the eyes of the Apocalypse Guards, as soon as these seemingly extraordinary birds entered their magic range, they would see a sky full of bird feathers and blood splattering everywhere. They wondered how these guys would feel when they saw the birds that they had painstakingly bred being killed in a single move. Their expressions of despair and grief would be very funny. Unknowingly, they accelerated and charged at the Alliance's flying fleet. Their desire to kill was so strong that they didn't notice that the distance between the Alliance's flying beast was already very far apart. In front of the Alliance's flying fleet, on the bow of Hood, a female general wearing a deep purple armor with complicated patterns engraved on every corner of the armor was standing in the wind with her arms crossed in front of her chest. The strong wind blew her long hair, and her gorgeous cloak was almost on the same level as the sea, making a fluttering sound. Chandri's Feathermoon was the great general of the Night Elves. In the eyes of others, she was the most powerful and beautiful elf. But this female general, who always had a serious expression on her face, suddenly moved her long ears, and then a gentle expression appeared on her face. Got it. In her field of vision, the front suddenly opened up as all the Griffins and Hippogriffons were stuck in the firing range of the Apocalypse Guards and spread out. At that moment, all the Apocalypse Guards saw it. It's my turn. Chapter 15-14. No one had expected Tyron's adopted daughter to be so talented. Ever since her parents died in the War of the Ancients and she was adopted by Tyrant, Chandris had slowly grown up. Although she had never joined the Elune Sisterhood and wasn't an official priest of the Moon Goddess Temple, she was one of the only 2 Night Elves who could use Lunar Rail Cannon. This skill was called Falling Stars, and it was an ultimate skill that covered all areas of the map. Its power was insane and inhumane. Almost everywhere he looked, powerful enemies were annihilated. The only thing that restricted this skill was not the divine power of the moon goddess Elune, but the mental strength of the caster who guided the falling stars. Other than Chandris, only Tyrant, who was a high priest and a ranger, had the ability to instantly lock onto more than 100 moving targets. Apart from Chandris, mental strength, magic power and faith were all indispensable. Since Duque intentionally told Tyrant to hold back on this ultimate skill, the important task of clearing out the Apocalypse Guards was given to Chandris. After chanting an incantation that wasn't very long, a magic circle with complicated runes that kept revolving under Chandris' feet was activated. In the sky, a white and flawless beam of light descended from the sky, covering an area of 10 meters around Chandris. Countless magic runes and symbols that represented the moon rotated clockwise on this beam of light that reached the sky. In the name of the moon goddess Elune, die, demons. Along with Chandri's heroic declaration, countless purple beams of light descended from the sky and focused on the heads of the Apocalypse Guards. Regardless of whether they were doing Thomas's spin or zigzag, the beam of light that shrouded their heads followed them and kept aiming at their heads. In the next moment, the number of pieces of the debris of the stars fell on the heads of the Apocalypse Guards. It was a declaration of death, and it was inevitable destruction. When they finally realized that dodging was a joke, every Apocalypse Guard stopped moving and began to adjust their magic shields. If they couldn't dodge, they would take it head-on. Almost every Doomsday Guard thought the same. But at this moment, the Alliance's air fleet, which had already flattened the ship's hull, and the surface fleet below, suddenly set off a rain of holy light that all demons could not forget. With the octuple bang cannon as the core and a considerable number of 40mm Bofors cannons, the Alliance's new fleet taught the Burning Legion a good lesson with the holy light cannons blessed by the Naru. Once upon a time, mortals were incomparably weak in front of demons. Ordinary swords didn't even have the qualifications to cut demons. They would be turned into dregs by all kinds of spells before they even got close. In fact, during the first year of the Dark Portal, Even the most capable holy knights wouldn't laugh at the cowardice of ordinary soldiers. That was because in the face of absolute power, all courage would pale in comparison. As for the so-called meaning, only the historians would write about it with heavy words, but in fact it was useless. Back then Archimonde had destroyed the Daoist without much effort. With a gentle wave of his hand, no matter what the mortals did, it would be useless. In the eyes of the mortals, the impregnable magic tower was rumbling and trembling. The bricks used to build it were falling apart and falling to the ground. The magic inscriptions engraved on the bricks became the epitaph of the mages. The dark energy swept over like a storm, and then all the buildings began to tilt and collapse. The surviving mages could only watch as the buildings that symbolized the Daoist's glory for more than 2,000 years cracked open one after another before finally collapsing into pieces. The first official appearance of the Burning Legion was a silent mockery of the weakness of mortals. But today, everything was different. The air fleet, which had integrated its attack methods, was also equipped with a large number of magic cannons. Apart from the white smoke, one could also see a series of golden crystal-like beams shooting out from the muzzles. The beams streaked across the sky for thousands of meters before finally piercing into the group of Apocalypse guards like a torrential rain of golden light beams. If the Doomsday guards only had to face Chandrise's lunar rail cannon, they might have been able to survive it. But the attack of the compound attribute had cut off their last shred of luck. These brutal flying creatures that had conquered countless planets and worlds and came from the twisted void had their wings or bodies pierced in an instant. They did not even have time to wail before they turned into countless irregular parts and fell from the sky, raining down a dirty rain of green blood. Well done. Did you hear that? Damn the demons. This is the resistance of the mortals. Cheers rang out in the Alliance. At that moment Queen Sylvanas, who was at the frontline command, also smiled in satisfaction. Demons like the Doomsday Guards were considered high-level soldiers in the Burning Legion. They were almost omnipotent in the sky, underground, and the sea. And their rich combat experience meant that they were rarely at a disadvantage. Who knew that the Alliance would be able to kill more than 500 Doomsday Guards in one shot? If the demons do not send more troops, it will not be difficult to finish off the rest of the demons. Duque could not agree with Queen Sylvanas. How is that possible? I will be happy even if we can kill them faster than the demons. At that moment a guard suddenly came to report. Queen Sylvanas heard this. Let her in. The person who was brought in by the guards was a beautiful female elf with a graceful figure, fair skin, and light blue hair. But no one in the command center would think of her as a Sin Dorii or Quell Dorii. She seemed to be so emotional that she did not retract her dragon's aura. Duque stood up and walked over. He extended his hand to the blue-haired lady. Welcome, Lady Matagosa. No need for the pleasantries. If you did not tell me that you have absolute confidence in saving Calegos, no one would have been able to stop me. The lady called Matagosa did not seem reasonable. Duque smiled. Anyone familiar with the dragon name would know who she was after hearing the name Matagosa. As a member of the Blue Dragon Legion and a good friend of the Blue Dragon Calegos, Matagosa joined the army against Kill Jaden's evil plan without hesitation. The original history was, after Calegos was controlled because he was alone, she went deep into the hinterland of the Well of the Sun to search for Calegos' whereabouts, and eventually fought the Lord of the Abyss, Brutalis, to the death. Unfortunately, her strength was too limited and she died in the hands of Fatty Boo. The third boss of the Sunwell Highlands, Fimes, was transformed from the corpse of this female Matagosa. Chapter 15:15. No one knew how much work Duque had done behind the scenes to wait for Kill Jaden to come in. There were originally 6 bosses in the Well of the Sun. Number 5, Muru, had become the guardian of the Dreniai's new capital, Exodar, in Azeroth due to the changes in history. Number 4, Eridar Gemini, had said to Duque, "Huh." Number 3, Femis, was still alive and kicking. Cursing her to die and become a bone dragon was the most shameless thing. Number 2, Brutalis, the fatty, was the only boss who did his job. As for number 1, Calegos the idiot, alright, Duque admitted that he had forgotten about him on purpose. Calegos, the new Blue Dragon King who had traveled through the future, had an interracial Palatine romance. First, he had failed in his attempt to open a well. Then what made Duque uncomfortable was that this barbarian got together with Jaina, who had already turned into an old woman. Although in this life, Duque had already dominated Jaina in all aspects, from her spirit to her body, and with Teacher Du's various instigation and various positions to unlock, Duque was not worried that Jaina would run away. However, he still felt a little uncomfortable. In a moment of carelessness, Duke decided to correct the idiot Collego's bad hobbies for the sake of justice. The reason why the Blue Dragon clan wasn't thriving was because Collegos and his unattractive descendants were causing trouble. As a good friend, Matagosa had risked her life to enter the enemy's lair to save the dragon. How could a simple friendship explain this? It was no longer a relationship of friendship and love. Looking at her nervous expression, it was as if she wanted to die for Collegos. How could Duque bear not to fulfill such a good girl's wish? Duque opened a magic mirror and saw that the dragon-shaped Collegos was shaking his head and letting out a low roar. Duque noticed that the big sister had clenched her hands into fists. Her nails were probably digging deep into her palms. Matagosa had not completely lost her mind. She asked nervously, "What's going on with Collegos? Is his life in danger? Where did this magic mirror image come from?" "Collegos won't die. It's just that his soul has been suppressed by the soul of a dreadlord and is in a frenzied state. As for this magic mirror image, you have to know that the Isle of Quel'Danas used to be Sindoriai's territory, and I am the one who rebuilt the Well of the Sun, so it is normal for me to have a backup plan. Moreover, my high-ranking spies in the Burning Legion are also helping us clear a path. Collegos will be fine. As long as the army completes this teleportation, all the cards will be gathered." The confident smile on Duque's face made Matagosa feel at ease. The cooperation between Long Sleep Shrine and Duque had always been very pleasant. Ever since they worked together to kill Deathwing, Duque had never disappointed the Dragon Sleep Temple. Moreover, killing Miserio was equivalent to avenging the Blue Dragon Legion's annihilation. In the Blue Dragon Legion, other than the bad-tempered Maligos, the other Blue Dragons had a very good impression of Duque. If it had to be described in terms of prestige, it would be a solidified worship. After the initial excessive panic and nervousness subsided, Matagosa finally remembered that this seemingly ordinary human in front of him was actually an Azeroth demigod who was on an equal footing with the Dragon Kings. Matagosa bowed deeply. "I was too nervous just now. If my tone offended Lord Marcus, please forgive me." "It's fine." Duque waved his hand generously and glanced at Tyrant. "If my lover was caught by a demon, I would go crazy too." Big Sister Blue Dragon's face instantly turned red like a steamed prawn. She didn't notice that Tyrant had a similar expression. Tyrant really didn't know whether to feel lucky or shy. Back then she was caught, turned around and sent to Duque. Well, Big Sister Blue Dragon had been ignored by the players in his previous life. It could be said that her secret love had finally surfaced at this moment. Matagosa asked, "Then what should we do now?" Duque smiled. "The best hunters should learn patience. Even if we do nothing now, our hounds will still send the prey into the range of our hunting rifles." As if to prove this statement, the Sunwell was in a mess. The first Apocalypse Guard Brigade has been wiped out. Should we send the second Apocalypse Guard Brigade? The front line says that the mortals' firepower is unexpectedly fierce, and there are traces of Dreenii Holy Light weapons. Please advise. In the command post of the Sunwell, every Eridar warlock in charge of communication unconsciously had a tone of nervousness and panic in their words. At this time it should be Fatibou. Apart from him, there was no one else in the entire Sunwell who could hear the footsteps that sounded like an earthquake. Apart from him, there was a bunch of messy and heavier footsteps. The door of the hall where the command post was located suddenly opened, and Fatibou strode in with a group of Void Lords. Behind him were 2 Apocalypse Guard Lords, 3 Darksiders and 5 Dread Guard Lords. The Eridar Gemini only took a glance and lost interest. Due to the quality limit of the teleportation portal, only low-tier Void Lords could come this time. Alright, it's time to attack. Gemini, you and Benatri and Phoebus attack the flying fleet on the sea. Penrit, you and your brothers attack the elven coastline. At first, Fatibou was going to say what he had planned in one breath. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a smile at the corner of Aura's mouth. Fatibou was suddenly unhappy. In his eyes, the army was always invincible. If planet Azeroth did not have that damn Titan protection circle, the army would have destroyed the planet 1,000 times over. Since they came to Azeroth to farm military merits, why should they let the Gemini benefit? Brutalist changed his tone. Wait, Gemini, you should stay in the Sunwell. Those complicated magic circles are still your Eridar's forte. There was a faint look of disappointment on the Eridar Gemini's face. It was just a little bit. As drama queens, they had a good grasp of the situation. If they did not say anything, it would not be in line with their current position. If they looked too depressed, it would be too fake. While Fatty Boo was smiling happily, the one who was the happiest was the Gemini. Just like that, 3 Darksiders and 5 Dread Guard Lords, a total of 8 Void Lords charged out of the Sunwell and headed straight for the Alliance's fleet. The remaining 2 Apocalypse Guard Lords charged to the defensive line on the shore. Duque chuckled, his right index finger rhythmically tapping on the armrest of his chair. Really, who gave you the courage to challenge the elites of Azeroth? Chapter 15-16. On the other side of the sea, Duque had already made arrangements. But on this side he had originally planned to let Queen Sylvanas cooperate with Theon to deal with the Demon Lords. At this time, Duque glanced at the big sister Blue Dragon. It would be a waste not to use the hired thugs that were delivered to his doorstep. Lady Matagosa, can you deal with one of the Apocalypse Guard leaders that are attacking from the sky? The big sister Blue Dragon hurriedly bowed. It would be my honor to serve Lord Marcus, who has greatly helped the Blue Dragons. On the shoreline, the Blood Elves were a little panicked. The pressure the 2 Apocalypse Overlords gave them was too great. Low-level mysteries were destined to be defeated by high-level mysteries. Naru's Holy Light Blessing could fight demons below the level of Lord. For demons above the level of Lord, it could only be a fight between kings and generals. The Alliance's cutting-edge Holy Light Array air defense system could not break the light-green magic shield around the Apocalypse Lords at all. The Blood Elves just pressed the triggers of the anti-air cannons crazily with their blood energy. In fact, it was a complete waste. Seeing that the Queen did not respond, Lord Themar and Hadron had already taken out their longbows and were ready to attack on their dragon eagles. Near the command post in the rear, 2 thunderous dragon roars resounded and rumbled in all directions. Long live the Queen! Long live the Dragon Knights! In the open space next to the command post, 2 huge and elegant creatures spread their wings. The former fallen red dragon Varistaz and Matagosa, 1 red and 1 blue dragon, were ready to fight. Varistaz had been tricked by Nefarian, the Black Dragon Prince, and his strength could no longer return. His current strength was only at the level of an adult dragon. He could not return to the level of an ancient dragon. The dragon alone was not even as strong as Matagosa. However, the old red dragon was just a mount. If they really fought, they had to count Queen Sylvanas on his back. Queen Sylvanas' eyes were like lightning and her face was frosty. She held the strongest epic bow in this era, Dark Bow of the Betrayer, which she had taken from the treasury of Illidan's Darkness Temple. If the bowstring was removed, this longbow would look more like a crescent moon. Apart from having the most powerful long-range attack bonus, it also had close-range combat effects. On the body of the bow, the upper and lower ends were like 2 long crescent blades. At the front of the grip, there were 3 sharp blades extending out like the blades of a fist. The back of the grip was directly connected to a typical gauntlet. As long as Sylvanas willed it, it would become an incomparably sharp melee weapon. Under the hood, her long blonde hair slightly flowed out. Together with the black and gold-edged cloak behind her, Queen Sylvanas looked valiant and full of fighting spirit. Go, Valistaz! The old red dragon roared again and flapped his wings. Although the surrounding elven guards had long since left, the sand and stones raised when the dragons took off were still like a sandstorm, rolling up debris all over the sky. When the 2 dragons flew into the sky, debris fell like rain. Hadron and Lord Themar looked up at the 2 pairs of dragon wings that covered the sky and the sun rising higher and higher. When the shadow of the dragon wings almost covered a small square, both of them slightly opened their mouths. The massive crimson dragon looked like the most gorgeous work of art. Almost every blood elf warrior was looking at the sparkling red scales under the sunlight with a look of worship. Her scales reflected the sunlight, making Queen Sylvanas look like she was enveloped in a halo of sacred and inviolable flames. As expected, Sylvanas is the true pride of us elves. Hadron's voice sounded like he was in a dream. Yeah. For Themar felt the same way. The 2 dragons and the Dragon Knight flew to the Lord of the Apocalypse and stopped 300 meters away. Queen Sylvanas raised her head and looked at the Demon Lord in the sky with her icy eyes. Insignificant mortals. Queen Sylvanas was not happy with the demons of the Burning Legion. Although the Mages faction was meant to be a group of traitors, and they were meant to be killed together, she was still unhappy. Queen Sylvanas pointed with her boots, and Valestas immediately understood. After being saved from the Fallen, he was much weaker in a prolonged battle, and his instantaneous explosive power was not strong either. It might be a bit difficult for him to bully a beginner-level Void Lord. Don't forget that there was still Queen Sylvanas. She drew her bow and nocked an arrow. Her movements were so smooth. If Queen Sylvanas had only touched the threshold of a demigod when on Courage and the Sword Emperor fought, she was already half a step into the demigod realm now. Duke now had so many genuine demigods in his hands, and whenever he had the time he would feed Queen Sylvia's moves. Other than Onyxia, who had a hard time holding back in her dragon form, the twin emperors and Vashti were the best candidates. This was especially true for Vashti, who taught Queen Sheila her thunder arrows without reservation. Therefore, when the arrow in Queen Sylvanas' hand lit up with lightning that even the sunlight couldn't cover, the Apocalypse Guard was dumbfounded. Valestas took the opportunity to pounce. His 4 dragon claws immediately suppressed the Apocalypse Guard's limbs, and his dragon mouth was about to bite the Apocalypse Guard's neck. For the Apocalypse Guard lords who had thick skin and flesh, this was not fatal. What was truly terrifying was that Queen Sylvanas, who was on the dragon's back, leaned out at this time and shot a close-range shot into the Apocalypse Guard's silly mouth. Asterisk boom. Asterisk with a bang. The original position of the Apocalypse Lord's head was instantly replaced by an extremely dazzling purple-blue lightning. On the other side, while Martigosar and the other Apocalypse Lord fought fiercely, the situation on the sea also changed. At first, not many lords noticed that some mysterious power had instantly pulled the entire sea level down by tens of centimeters. Soon, a white line visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared on the surface of the sea between the fleet and the Isle of Quel'Danas. When the sea cracked and split to the left and right in a rumbling sound, a deep valley and 2 parallel waterfalls were revealed. Millions of tons of seawater poured down from the cliffs on both sides. With the help of binoculars, the Alliance soldiers could even see the situation at the bottom of the sea. In the shallow sea area that was not considered deep, a 6-armed female Naga coiled her snake tail and sat upright on a coral reef at the bottom of the sea. There was a clear mockery on her beautiful face. Azeroth is the territory of us, the Azeroth creatures. Go back to where you came from. Then the Alliance soldiers saw a strange scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. Vashti's true demigod power not only divided the 2-kilometer-long sea into 2, but also suddenly rose with her as the center. 2 huge sea tornadoes with a height of 1,000 meters suddenly rose. The huge waves immediately covered the 8 demon lords. The violent water current, with the impact of thousands of tons, forcibly pulled all the demon lords to the bottom of the sea. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.